Okay. Nancy, ready to go or do you need a minute? Okay. Okay. Ready to go or do you need a minute? Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting of the City of Laguna Beach Planning Commission, May 6th, to order at this time. We'll now take a roll call.
Chair Kellenberg,
Here.
Acting Chair Goldman,
Here.
Chair Whiten. Sorry,
Everyone's a chair tonight.
it's been a day. I apologize. Commissioner Whiten,
Here.
Commissioner Dubin,
Here.
Commissioner Sadler.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, and just want to confirm, Chair Kellenberg, that there's nobody participating with you in wherever you are around the world today?
In Hon Long Bay, Vietnam, there is nobody here with me today.
Okie doke. All right. By the way, you're getting the most miles award this year. Okie doke.
It'll quiet down.
At this time, members of the public may address the Planning Commission regarding any items not on the agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. No action may be taken on off-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes each unless extended for good cause by the Planning Commission. Are there anybody who wishes to come forward? And when you come forward, please state your name and then enter your name in the logbook.
Good evening, Pat Minna, 31988 10th Avenue, 30-year resident in our beautiful cottage. I'm addressing the Planning Commission because this is a postcard that I received a week ago Saturday. And although I am a senior member of society and I have these beautiful glasses on, I could not read the back of this card. This is, I think it's a 7-point. I had to pull out a magnifying glass. So I am also going to be attending the city council meeting because in the industry, I'm a real estate broker, but in the industry, this is a 4-up card. We need to go to a 2-up card. We need to send a postcard, same postage, folks. It needs to be bigger print, bigger typeface. When I was talking to all my neighbors about, did you receive the postcard from the Planning Commission? They said, yeah, but we couldn't even read it. Inquiring minds want to know, well, I didn't leave it at that, but we need to do better on noticing our public. It's very important. 7 points doesn't work. A 4-up does not work anymore. It needs to be at least a half page, a 2. Same postage, nothing lost. Thank you, and I do appreciate your service.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Tom Addis. I'm a resident of South Laguna Beach. I'm here to talk about the pilot parking program and other affiliated.
Yeah, that will be once that agenda item comes up. This
Okay,
is
so
for
this
items
is
not
a
on the
preliminary
agenda.
project.
This is just general comments,
Okay.
things that are not on our agenda.
Can I talk about the trees? No.
What trees?
Yeah. Okay, anybody else?
Hi, Nick Aronoff, fourth generation Laguna Beach resident. Because he brought up the trees, I guess I'll bring them up. You know, when after the whole thing happened, and I totally understand, you know, the safety issue that was involved and the liability issue, and that nobody wanted those trees to come down. I did spend probably I don't know what it was, 3 or 4 days watching about 6 hours of planning commission and city council joint meetings that you guys had. And one thing came along where Deputy Director Vieira had mentioned, if something had happened, there was kind of a quip by the SWA, about, like if the trees can handle standing up after, the concrete's removed. And there was kind of a chuckle kind of insinuating that they probably wouldn't. And that you had mentioned, Vieira, that, if a tree falls, they would be replaced back in the exact same position. I think Commissioner Sadler, you had mentioned that as well. So I'm just curious, and I think the public would probably like to know, the new plans that were put in place, SWA, was that the backup plans? Were they just whipped up in the last few days after the trees had to come down? I think, we've heard from City Council. I think it would be good for the public to hear from the Planning Commission, because you guys were so intimately involved as well, whether it's the selection of the trees, the location of the trees, and how that process is moving forward now that, unfortunately, the original trees were lost. Because obviously those were contingencies when everything was being planned and nobody really knew what was going to happen, or maybe they did. We don't know. And so I just think the public would appreciate some openness and clarity and some honesty from the Planning Commission, to hear their thoughts on what happened. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Okey-doke. We'll now move to our first public hearing item on the agenda. It's tentative parcel map 2026-0793, coastal development permit 2026-0802.
Thank you, Acting Chair Goldman and members of the Planning Commission. Project Planner Shariar Khan could not be here for the meeting this evening, and so I will be giving the presentation on staff's behalf. As was stated, item 5.1 is a tentative parcel map and a coastal development permit for a lot merger involving 3 parcels known as 2500 Glenary Street, 2500 Palo Way, and 2500 Quaida Way. Shown on the left-hand side of the screen here is a location map with the 3 parcels outlined in yellow. And on the right is a street view of that project area. By way of background, why is this before the commission this evening? Well, on February 12th of this year, the Design Review Board approved a new single-family residence on the vacant project site. As part of that approval, the Design Review Board imposed condition number 22, which requires a parcel map to merge the 3 lots prior to the issuance of a building permit or a grading permit. Why was that required? That's because lot mergers are required in this instance to meet building code. As part of the proposed project, the applicant, who owns all 3 parcels, is proposing a structure that crosses shared lot lines. And so this application that's before the commission this evening was specifically contemplated by the project that the board had considered, and therefore this condition was imposed to meet building code requirements. On the screen is another view of the project area. Again, existing lot configurations shown on the record of survey on the left, and on the right is the proposed tentative parcel map submitted as part of this application. The 3 parcels are zoned R1 residential low density. And here is a larger view of the tentative parcel map. The proposed development footprint of the single family home and garage are outlined in red. I did want to point out that outlined in blue is a mapped watercourse on the site. As part of the board's approval, they did approve a watercourse encroachment variance. Now, those entitlements have been granted. That is not under consideration this evening before the Planning Commission this evening is only your review and recommendation to City Council on 2 entitlements, the tentative parcel map and the coastal development permit for that tentative parcel map. As was indicated in the staff report this evening, staff believes that all required findings can be met. The project satisfies the requirements of the state's Subdivision Map Act. It complies with all applicable sections and policies of the general plan and all applicable provisions of the Laguna Beach Municipal Code, as well as the Certified Local Coastal Program. Before you this evening is also a staff recommendation to find this action exempt from CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, under the Class 3 categorical exemption for new construction. This is consistent with the determination that the board had made on February 12th when they rendered the first discretionary action on this project. And as was mentioned as part of this presentation, the board did specifically contemplate both the residential development along with the proposed lot configuration that would be effectuated through the parcel map. I also wanted to inform the commission, the public, and the applicant that there has been a revised resolution with revised conditions of approval posted to the meeting agenda this afternoon. The applicant was provided with a copy of both documents with the red line changes earlier this afternoon. Staff is not aware of any concerns from the applicant. I did want to briefly summarize the nature of those changes. Primarily, they're intended to ensure maximum clarity with this proposed decision on the project. The conditions of approval, what they do is primarily they are reinforcing the applicable municipal code requirements that govern this application process, which is a two-step process. First, the city council would be approving a tentative parcel map, and then they would approve a final map application. And that process is prescribed by the city's municipal code. I would describe the conditions as technical in nature. They include requirements such as specific timing requirements for city required actions and applicant required actions to ensure that the parcel map can be effectuated properly in accordance with code requirements. And that brings us to the staff recommendation this evening, which is to adopt the resolution with the revisions recommended by city staff, which is a recommendation to the city council to approve the tentative parcel map application and the coastal development permit application, and finding the actions exempt from CEQA under Class 3. That will conclude the staff presentation, and I am available for questions. Thank you.
Before any questions, I forgot to ask any commissioner disclosures.
Yeah, I met with the applicant on site today.
I did as well.
Okay. I just have a quick question, just confirmation. Once the tentative parcel map and coastal development permit is approved by city council, all set, ready to go? Nothing, nothing beyond permits, et cetera, no other issues?
Thank you for that question. There is a separate application that would be filed before the parcel map can be recorded with the county and effectuated, and that would be the final map process. That is essentially part of the Subdivision Map Act requirements per state law, and that application would be reviewed by the city council. For that part of the process, there is no planning commission role. That application would be submitted to the city, processed, and presented to the city council for action.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any issues, I mean, with these late proposed revisions to the resolution? Any issues regarding just the process and how this was noticed and public disclosure of this stuff?
Staff doesn't have any concerns. Now, we do want to hear from the commission, the public, and the applicant. The applicant was provided with a copy of the conditions that they would be beholden to prior to this hearing. One thing that I think is worth emphasizing here is that these conditions don't alter the configuration that was presented with the staff report. It doesn't modify the findings for approval. What they do is, again, they essentially explain and clarify the technical requirements that requirements that govern the processing of a parcel map.
And then to follow up on Mr. Deputy Director, so, the Brown Act and the public notice requires just kind of a short description of the item to be discussed. The agenda qualifies for that. Further, as I'm sure you guys are aware, oftentimes we change resolutions all the time based off of, not in this context, but, project modifications or suggestions by the Planning Commission. Our office, of course, was in contact with Mr. Vieira's office, and we're confident that should the Planning Commission exercise its discretion to approve, it is legally sound.
Great, thank you.
So to summarize, the new conditions have to do with process and nothing else.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anthony, would this lot consolidation result in a similar development pattern as seen as in the adjacent properties and neighborhood?
Yes, and what I would do is I would cite back to the design review board's findings. They did specifically consider neighborhood compatibility, and also were aware that as part of the development application, the 3 lots would be merged into one legal lot.
And you don't see any significant impact on the natural water course there with what the design review board has approved?
No, this action wouldn't change those conclusions. As part of the board's review, they did consider a peer-reviewed hydrology report that specifically analyzed for that.
And was there ever any history of somebody prior to the current ownership or wanting to try to develop the property, or as they were obviously 3 separate properties? Was there any history in city records that show somebody tried to potentially develop any of the properties in the past?
I don't happen to have the full property history at my fingertips, but what I can tell the commission this evening is that interest was expressed. There was at a minimum communications between city staff and other parties that were involved prior to the applicant's acquisition of the lots. The lots are zoned for residential development, so there at least was interest expressed, and lot constraints were discussed. I don't know if any applications were processed. I don't believe any are currently valid other than the applicant's entitlements granted by the board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Kellenberg, any questions from you?
No questions. I think everything was covered. Thank you.
Okey doke. Thank you. I will now open the public hearing. We can start with the applicant, who has 5 minutes for a presentation if you'd like. Please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I am Edwin Kissel, project applicant. Well, thank you, Anthony, for the introduction of the project, and it's now my pleasure to introduce the owners and applicants. So owners, Mark and Sue Winter, sitting behind us, are 38-year residents of Laguna Beach and longtime artists at the Sawdust Festival. They purchased the lots with the Blue Cottage next door after the 1993 wildfire destroyed their home. They've been working with the city for 30 years with regards to these lots. As for the applicants, Amanda's my wife. She has a strong connection to the land, having grown up there. She's a graduate of Laguna Beach High School and is following in her parents' footsteps as a Sawdust Festival artist. I have 15 years of federal, military and civilian legal experience practicing environmental law, and I'm active in volunteer service for the city of Laguna Beach. Amanda and I have been working with Shariar on this project since late 2023, and as Anthony mentioned, in February, we received the Design Review Board approval to build a classic Laguna cottage as our forever home. So in order to obtain the building permit, we seek your approval or your recommendation for City Council approval to merge the 3 lots. So we're following the direction of city staff, who advised us to process the lot merger as a tentative parcel map. And Commissioner Dubin, to answer your question, there was a building permit issued around 1980 for a single-family residence that crossed the 2500 Glen Eyrie, 2500 Palo Way which I believe was in the staff report as well. So that concludes my presentation, and we thank you for consideration of our lot merger.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant from the planning commissioner? I have one quick question. When the land was acquired, were all three lots acquired together or was it assembled? It was together.
It was together with the Blue Cottage next door, but the Blue Cottage is on its own lot, and then there's these three lots.
Okay. Okay. Great. If no more questions, we will now open the floor for public comments on this item. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. If you'd like to speak, please come up to the podium, state your name and address before beginning. After you're done speaking, please print your name on the sheet on the table so we can get the spelling of your name correct for the record. Anybody wish to speak? Okey doke. Close the public session now and go to commissioner comments.
I'll go ahead. I think it's, it's a logical step for, the property owners to be able to create a lot big enough to meet the building codes in Laguna Beach. So, and after spending a little time down there looking at it, and the fact that you've already gained entitlements from the design review board, that we're simply looking at the lot merger. I don't see any reason to put the brakes on it at all. I will approve this.
Seems very straightforward, although 30 years doesn't seem very straightforward. I think that's the record, certainly the record that I've ever heard. The approval from the DRB requires the Planning Commission to recommend to the City Council that these three lots be merged as one parcel, a tentative tract parcel. So I can make all the findings for the tentative parcel map and the coastal development permit. I've often wondered about this parcel. It's really charming and mysterious. And I think the site plan is really great. Not that this is part of what we're opining about today, but the way the building is sited, leaving so much of the land area open, I think is going to be really nice on the street.
Thank you. Commissioner Kellenberg?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a logical. I commend them for their tenacity in doing this fairly complicated project and the ability to get a house on that lot. When I first saw it, it looked like it was, really squeezed on there, but it seems to work. I was concerned about the impact on the open space corridor, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. And besides, DRB did look at that. So I'm supportive.
Yeah, I'm supportive as well. I think the staff report did a good job of explaining why this was necessary to make this a buildable site, why this lot consolidation was required rather than a lot line adjustment for technical reasons. And going out there today, and I bumped into Commissioner Dubin, who happened to be there while the applicant was there as well. So that was nice. I had an opportunity to chat with them. But it's a unique parcel. Even as it's all put together, it's not going to be a particularly easy building site. It's a relatively steep site. It is crossed by what is, we've recently gone through some discussions regarding water courses and what isn't and what is not a water course. And there's some areas in town where we have some mapped water courses that are questionable whether or not there really are a water course anymore. But this, even though there was no running water at it at this particular time, it's pretty apparent as being an actual water course. So, but all the analysis regarding the design of the structure itself and meeting all the requirements, in terms of water course setbacks and things like that, were previously heard by the design review board. And our role here is simply about this lot consolidation. I was happy, as I wandered around the site a little bit, and it's pretty overgrown and rugged as it is right now. But there are a couple of pretty significant mature trees that are closer to the water course. I asked the applicant, if they're the plans, the current plans, which again is not really part of our purview here tonight, but whether the current plans for the house itself were going to affect those trees, and they said not. I think there's a big sycamore and I think a large oak tree that's there as well. So happy that those are planned to remain, and I see no reason not to approve this. I can also make the coastal development permit findings and agree that this is exempt from CEQA. So I'm supportive of this and wish you luck.
So I can make the finding as well and support the project. So should we take a motion
Yeah.
or a vote? A
I-
motion, then
Remember to talk about the amended things, but
Yes.
we'll go ahead.
Planning Commission adopts Resolution 2026-0793 as amended by staff, recommending City Council approval of tentative track map 2026-0793 and coastal development permit 2026-0802 to merge 3 lots at 2500 Glenary Street, 2500 Pallaway, and 2500 Cato Way into a single lot in the R1 residential low-density zone, and finding the project categorically exempt from CEQA under guideline section 15303.
I'll second.
Commissioner Kellenberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Whiten,
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin,
Yes.
Commissioner Sadler,
Yes.
Acting Chair Goldman.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
One step closer.
Thanks, Chair. That'll bring us to item 5.2. I will be turning it over to the presenters in just a moment, but since these are new faces before the Planning Commission, I did want to briefly introduce them to you. We have with the Planning Division, Alyssa Suarez, one of our associate planners, and then also here to speak on behalf of the Public Works Department, we have our new Assistant City Engineer, Tran. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alyssa to kick off the presentation.
Okay, and I need to, do I leave now?
Correct, yeah. So, and just for the record, Acting Chair Goldman is recused from this item due to the proximity of his residence to the project. You, sir, are excused.
Nice
And,
to leave. Yeah.
And to further complicate matters, because our chair, Kellenberg, is not present and is participating remotely, I will be acting chair for this particular item. But I'll remain seated here. So with that, if staff would like to give us our staff report on this item.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Alyssa Suarez, Associate Planner with the Community Development Department. Item 5.2 is a request for approval of a coastal development permit and temporary use permit to implement a 1-year parking pilot program in South Laguna. The project area extends roughly 3 miles along Coast Highway from Ruby Street to 500 feet south of Vista del Sol and includes the first block of 9 intersecting streets, including Upland Road, Catalina Avenue, Eagle Rock Way, 2nd through 5th, and 9th through 10th Avenues. This corridor currently contains mostly unmarked informal parking, except for limited single space meters, commercial parking, and red curb areas where parking is prohibited. Additionally, the project area is serviced by existing trolley and Orange County Transit Authority bus stops and city-operated parking lots. The purpose of the project is to improve traffic circulation and public safety for Coast Highway users and increase parking turnover and availability in highly trafficked areas near prominent coastal access points. The pilot program is intended primarily to gather data to ensure that the program is appropriately scaled, and to identify any unintended impacts as the city begins to consider a long-term management approach for parking in South Laguna. The proposed pilot introduces 22 solar-powered pay stations, designates approximately 501 new marked spaces, and formalizes permitted parking and established time limits. An example of the proposed pay station and associated directional signage is illustrated here in these photos. Approximately half of the new spaces will remain unmetered to preserve free and convenient coastal access. Additional improvements include updated parking and wayfinding signage and landscaping maintenance along the right-of-way to trim back overgrown vegetation that currently encroaches onto sidewalks and impedes pedestrian access. So this pilot builds on the city's parking management program, which has been developed over the past decade plus to improve coastal access, reduce congestion, and support the residents and businesses. The community has continuously expressed interest in parking management in this area, where parking is sporadic, accidents are a common occurrence, and parking is already substandard to the demand. Council direction from previous years, as well as 2023 and 2026, have emphasized improving parking management in South Laguna, especially during the high-demand summer season. And in February of this year, the Commission adopted an updated parking rate structure for the years 2026 and 2030 that resulted in an increase in 10% of all city parking lots and meter zones. Under the municipal code, the city manager can also implement temporary traffic regulations for up to 90 days. So this pilot uses that authority initially with the coastal development permit and temporary use permit, allowing up to a 1-year duration. The long-term intent is to collect meaningful data to guide future parking strategies and permanent improvements to protect public safety.
Perfect. Thank you, Alyssa. As Alyssa mentioned, the purpose of this pilot program is to improve overall traffic safety for this 3-mile stretch of Coast Highway. As you can see, these photos, we have parking conditions that are problematic, or some would say chaotic, causing slowdowns on Coast Highway for those seeking available parking spaces and those trying to parallel park on a very busy street that can see upwards of 45 miles per hour and plus. And of course, we introduced that behavior with pedestrians, which you see here in this slide right here. And this is not new news. We have heard the concerns. For example, the unregulated parking and illegal parking, like covering up the intersection corners or driveways, so to speak, and some of the overgrown vegetation that you see here on this slide. All right. So, but we also have sprinkles of existing metered parking that showcase how it could be regulated and organized without chaos. Examples shown here, fronting Blue Lagoon Drive, and nearby is Wesley Drive, to your left and right, respectively. To put this all in perspective, this 3-mile stretch of road experiences about 37,000 vehicles per day, not accounting for the summer peaks. And then we look at the traffic safety statistics that we pulled from SWITRS, which is a statewide program that aggregates all the accidents in the county, as well as the state itself. And so we looked at the last 4 years because I try to forget the COVID year of 2020. So we had about 75 reported accidents on this stretch of roadway in itself in the year 2021 through 2025. Of those crashes, we see here on this slide that the chart shows that 43% are rear end accidents. And you can kind of guess how that happens with the expert driving and the expertise of parallel parking and those that can and cannot probably parallel park. And so next you'll have 17% in broadsides. And one of the more concerning ones is 15% of those accidents were vehicle versus pedestrian related. Of those three, the proposed conceptual design has the potential to address and reduce rear-end accidents and vehicle versus pedestrian accidents by emphasizing the daylighting law, which clears the corner so pedestrians and oncoming traffic can see each other, vice versa, right? Motorists can see pedestrians, pedestrians can see motorists, and making the parallel parking stalls to be standardized and organized to treat the parking behavior along the corridor. This creates more predictable movements and behaviors for drivers cyclists, and pedestrians, basically all the road users you'll see in this general area. These small measures, if approved by the various approval bodies, will help the overall roadway safety of this corridor. So what does those markings look like? And you kind of see here on these slides as an example of those markings. As you can see that this picture on the left showcases the parking tees, a standardized 8 feet by 22 feet parking stall. This is somewhat of the sweet spot for those that have a lot of experience parallel parking and those that have limited experience parallel parking. So all while providing appropriate levels of parking for access to the adjacent land uses. In addition, we're proposing inland side streets metered and unmetered parking to help regulate the allowance of on-street parking on both sides of the street while maintaining two-way traffic or limit it to parking on one side of the road. The first block from a major corridor like Coast Highway is vital in providing more spacing for proper turning movements and sight distance or visibility at intersections while upholding the proper standard travel lane widths and parking regulations that we have in front of us. This application is also consistent on how we manage the parking along Coast Highway in North Laguna Beach. And with that, I'll turn it back to Alyssa.
Thank you. In August of 2025, the city hosted a public workshop to discuss the community's concerns with parking demand and circulation in South Laguna. And on April 21st of this year, the city manager's office hosted a subsequent town hall meeting via Zoom to gather community input on the proposed pilot program. During that meeting, city staff presented the proposed plans and heard from community members. Overall, there was general support for the delineation of parking spaces for improved roadway circulation. However, residents expressed concerns about potential impacts to residential neighborhoods, including spillover from visitors seeking free parking further inland. The pilot is aimed at providing uniform controlled parking on the side streets where people currently park unrestricted, as Tran mentioned, encroaching along red curb areas, blocking driveways, and hindering line of sight at intersections. Staff believes this initial program can provide meaningful data to document those impacts. There were also safety concerns regarding pedestrians crossing on Coast Highway, so city staff has considered that in the design of the project and placement of the pay stations. Additional questions included revenue and operating costs associated with the project. So the city does not expect to see substantial revenue during this pilot project. The revenue generated from the metered parking would essentially cover the cost of implementation for the first year of the pilot. If the project does move forward for a long-term approach, staff would determine how that revenue would be distributed long-term as required under the capital improvement program, including maintenance of right-of-way infrastructure and parking enforcement of these metered areas. Finally, community members also expressed interest in ensuring commercial parking needs are protected. So in response to this feedback, staff revised the proposal by retaining existing commercial parking time limits outside of restaurants and commercial businesses, and also redistributing paid and unpaid parking spaces consistent with ADA requirements, ensuring that pay stations and paid parking spaces are accessible by improved walkways, and also within appropriate walking distance to pay stations, which is a maximum of 300 feet. The pilot remains flexible so that the city can continue adjusting based on the community's feedback. Additionally, I wanted to note that the project was properly noticed according to the Laguna Beach Municipal Code. It was also posted at various coastal access points and along Coast Highway, published in the newspaper, and also mailed to tenants and property owners within 300 feet of the 3-mile project area. The proposed temporary use permit includes the establishment of approximately 237 paid spaces and 264 free spaces. 5 of the 9 inland blocks will have metered spaces, and the rest will remain entirely free, subject to the applicable time limits. Parking restrictions will apply from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is consistent with city parking meter enforcement outside of the downtown area. A 5-hour maximum time limit will be implemented to encourage parking turnover, and outside of those hours, enforcement will not apply and overnight parking will remain unchanged. Proposed parking rates are consistent with the adopted citywide structure. The summer non-downtown rate of $3.95 per hour will apply along Coast Highway, and a reduced fee of $3.50 per hour will apply to the metered first blocks on Upland Road, Eagle Rock Way, Catalina Avenue, 2nd and 3rd Avenues. So based on discussions with the community and Coastal Commission staff, the project is conditioned upon the following. First, it's to remain fully reversible and limited to a 1-year pilot duration, with the underlying provision that the city will be required to request additional entitlements for any permanent improvements, including plans to move forward with the permanent request for striping. Additionally, parking enforcement will be in effect daily with respect to the maximum time limits. And right-of-way work will be limited to evenings and not allowed on weekends, for example, striping, in order to avoid conflicts with daytime public access. The expected project benefits include enhanced public safety. For example, marked stalls help drivers identify legal spaces quickly, reducing sudden stops and erratic maneuvers caused by informal shoulder parking. Additionally, organizing curbside parking supports safer conditions for pedestrians and cyclists. And by improving turnover and dispersing parking along the corridor, the project expects to reduce congestion and provide more consistent coastal access. And finally, maintaining a substantial supply of free and low-cost spaces supports equitable access, which is consistent with Coastal Commission guidance, and connecting users through improved multimodal access via the city's free trolley and the Orange County bus routes. As previously mentioned, the project would also retain free overnight parking and implement a reduced rate for inland blocks. So staff has received a wide range of comments during the public comment period, including concerns about the city's reliance on CEQA exemptions. The city's attorney's office has reviewed the project and confirmed the application of the Class 1 and Class 4 categorical exemptions are appropriate here. Changes to commercial parking along Coast Highway was also identified as a concern, and based on community feedback, the plans will retain existing parking limits for spaces along the frontage of commercial businesses and restaurants. Public comments also included suggestions for additional solutions like structured parking at Mission Hospital. These spaces are already made available for free on weekdays after 5 p.m. and all day on weekends, and the city provides additional parking throughout the city to help offset the demand during the summer months. Comments included expressed interest in a residential permit program. However, the Coastal Commission has explicitly restricted preferential parking programs, including residential permits. There were also extensive comments regarding the 5-hour time limit on inland streets. So this was implemented based upon guidance from the Coastal Commission to encourage turnover and promote coastal access that's consistent with the Coastal Act and also the city's local coastal program. This time limit is consistent across the project area with the exception of the commercial parking that I previously mentioned. Again, residents expressed concerns with potential spillover effects into residential neighborhoods for visitors seeking to avoid paying for parking along Coast Highway. And based upon existing data and resident reports, the parking along these inland blocks is already at a maximum use during peak season. So the project aims to capture additional data specifically related to turnover and use and retain order in areas where parking, again, is sporadic and at most times illegal along a corner or at an intersection, hindering line of sight and increasing hazards. Public comments also cited concerns regarding a lack of public outreach for the project. As previously discussed, the project was noticed in accordance with the municipal code, and city staff has heard from community members in various public forums, and this pilot intends to address the concerns heard in those meetings. I also want to emphasize that the pilot's temporary nature gives the city the opportunity to analyze these concerns using project-driven data before determining a long-term permanent approach. And that's why we're here tonight, to consider the community's feedback and ensure that the pilot project is implemented in a way that reflects real-time conditions, responds to community priorities, and also informs the most appropriate long-term parking management strategy for South Laguna.
Great. So the next steps will be, once the appropriate approvals are made, the 90-day window will start. And staff will be collecting data similar to what Alyssa was stating in regards to getting a better understanding how this pilot program will work. A lot of the data collection will be observation-based, but some technical reviews will be studied. For example, some of the safety analysis that will be studied will be the accident data. If we decrease accidents, travel times, improve parking organization and turnover, daily usage, avoidance of neighborhood spillover and impacts, all those details will be reviewed, studied, and then brought back to the brought back to the Parking and Traffic and Circulation Committee with the findings and potential recommendations for permanent implementation. Within the year, the staff will develop a long-term parking management plan and seek permanent coastal development permits. Within that recommendation, staff will evaluate the need for additional resources such as parking enforcement, understanding of revenue projections and expenditures, and additional programming to help manage and maintain the overall success of the long-term parking management plan. So this is, in a sense, our first step into exploring how to better manage and regulate the safe movement of vehicles, bicyclists, and pedestrians, and any other users of the road to go to the beach here in South Laguna Beach.
So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission review the proposed distribution of metered and unmetered parking spaces and consider whether the adjustments are warranted based upon community feedback, particularly along inland blocks adjacent to residential, commercial, and community serving uses. And after analyzing the request, staff believes that all required findings of fact can be made to support the requested entitlements. And accordingly, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt resolution number 2026-0617, approving the coastal development permit and temporary use permit and determining the project exempt from CEQA. Thank you, and staff is available for questions.
Thank you, Alyssa and Tran, for that staff report. I'll first ask if any planning commissioners have any questions. Commissioner Kellenberg, do you have any questions of staff?
Yes, I have two. Thank you. The first one is, to what degree is this program being forced on the city by the Coastal Commission, or is this completely voluntary for the reasons that you stated of safety and just better sort of organized, circulation? If we didn't do this, would there be any issues related to the Coastal Commission?
Thank you for that question, Chair Kellenberg. This is not a pilot that's being initiated or driven in any way by Coastal Commission staff. The basic parameters of the pilot were discussed with the Coastal Commission staff, understanding their interest and jurisdiction over the city's coastal zone, but this is a city pilot program. I think this topic has been discussed publicly by the Planning Commission and City Council and amongst residents, what to do with these issues with respect to visitor impacts on the city. And in response, the city staff has developed this pilot program, and it's intentionally a pilot because we do want to start with a test, not make any assumptions about what is or is not the optimal solution, and learn by testing out some concepts.
Okay, thank you. My second question relates to the permitting aspect of this. I understand completely why the Coastal Commission is adverse to neighborhood parking permits, because normally what that means is that you can't park on a street unless you have a neighborhood parking permit, and that restricts public access to coastal resources. So understand that completely. But there are other types of permitting, and like one type of permitting would be that let's say you implement this program on these side streets, and you do not restrict in any way public access to these side streets, but you do have a permit for local residents that allow them to park in metered spaces, in designated spaces, completely unrestricted and free of charge, so that this program on the side streets would not necessarily restrict the use by adjacent residents in any way, but it would still allow a better articulation of parking spaces and additional revenue and use by the public when not being used by the local residents. Did that type of permitting, was that evaluated as a potential resolution of some of the concerns that the local neighbors have?
Appreciate that question. Coastal staff did explain to the city in our meeting that they would interpret any distinction between resident parking privileges and visitor parking privileges or access as something that runs afoul of essentially an LCP requirement. That's the local coastal program that the city has. Quite a few years ago now, the Coastal Commission added a provision to the city's LCP that prevents the creation of preferential parking districts, and that's essentially what they're concluding if the city were to set different requirements or access for local residents. We did want to start there when we tried to explore that, but that just wasn't something that we could feasibly do. I will also say that the city does have a shopper's permit program that is a resident-only parking program for those that would like to purchase those passes. Coastal Commission is aware of that program. Now, I will say it's something that we tread lightly on. We don't want to change access because that would simply draw attention from the Coastal Commission in a way that I think would potentially threaten that program in the long term, which we certainly don't want to do. But I will say that the shopper's permit program is valid generally citywide, wherever there is metered parking with very limited exceptions. This pilot program would not expand those restrictions to additional areas in South Laguna. So you would be able to park at one of these spaces, whether on Coast Highway or on a residential street that falls within this program area. Those vehicles would be subject to the parking timing limits, but they would not need to pay for that parking for up to that 5-hour duration.
So I'm going to add a third question, sorry. To what degree do you, if the side street component of this program were completely eliminated and this program were only addressed on PCH, what would be the implications of that? I mean, again, this is all voluntary by the city. It's not being required by the Coastal Commission. So I would assume you would have the flexibility to make that adjustment.
City staff is prepared to implement the pilot without that additional parking for metered parking on the residential side streets. I will say from city staff's perspective, there is an interest in testing both the parking that's being proposed to be marked, signed, and metered on Coast Highway and doing something similar on a reduced scale on certain residential side streets, just to provide an additional data set. Again, city's interest here is in data collection, finding out what does and does not work specifically for Laguna Beach residents, and having that data to reflect on is, we do see value in that. So we wanted to test that out. But either way, the city is prepared to move forward with the pilot.
Okay, thank you. That's my last question. Thank you.
Commissioner Whiten?
Yes, I have two groups of questions. One first has to do with the process. And the second is questions about details, project details. You explained the TUP and the 90-day pilot project, at which point with data, you go to the Parking, Traffic, and Circulation Committee. And the data sounded as though it's going to be informally collected. What data are you going to bring to the PTC?
Yeah, so typically when we review parking regulations and parking scenarios, we take a look at several factors. I kind of mentioned it very quickly in my presentation and happy to repeat it, is that mainly we're looking for turnover, we're looking at daily usage, we're looking at overspill, and then the biggest component of all this, and I think the point of all this, is to address traffic safety. Are we making improvements? Are we reducing the collisions that do occur on an annual basis? Are we allowing better parking management along these corridors and the proper management of the parking in the corridors? And then finally, what is the enforcement component of this and how does that work out? And how should we proceed in the future?
Okay, so you get data from the pay stations, and then you'll get data from police reports on collisions.
Correct.
Half of the parking spaces are free. So how are you collecting data on those parking spaces?
So we'll do some sample surveys from our traffic consultant that we've hired to go through some of the processing and to fine tune the conceptual design that you see forth in your staff report. And then once they fine tune that, they also will be asked to do what we will call an AFR study to get those details.
Okay, and that will be presented to the PTC, which is a public meeting, and residents can attend that meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then from that point, it's go, no go. Is that right?
I would hope that.
To finish out the year.
Correct. I would hope that there would be some fine tuning with the recommendations and the findings that we have at the PTC. If we do have meaningful, thoughtful feedback that we can address and are actionable items, we will consider those and implement those as well, if that's allowed. And then we will move forward and looking throughout the rest of the year and providing most likely another review prior to the long-term parking management program that's going to be presented to the city council.
Okay. Yeah. My second question had to do with bifurcating the projects, whether that was possible for us to do that tonight and have the project go forward without coming back for another meeting. Is that the case?
That is correct.
Okay. Does Caltrans have to approve this?
We are currently working with Caltrans to seek what requirements they are going to require of the city. At the moment, they are considering that we will need an encroachment permit. So the answer is yes at the moment.
And who establishes the red curbs? Is that the city, Caltrans? Who does that?
It's a joint effort, but we all are looking at the same playbook. So to speak, is that the California TCD, which is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, governs a lot of the signing and striping that is out there today. Caltrans utilizes that as well. We do use other design criteria for traffic engineering. A lot of the red curb that you see out there today is due to the fact of line of sight, or what we come to find, state legislation with the daylighting rules. We are following those regulations for this pilot program, and so we are following suit with that.
Okay, and then my last question on the process is the schedule. Should we move forward with some version of, or the whole project as proposed tonight? Give us an idea when the pay stations and the striping would be in place.
I'll go through the process.
Yes, so if this project is approved tonight, it would be subject to a local appeals period. Any member of the public can appeal the project to the city council. If there are no appeals, then it would be subject to the Coastal Commission appeal period. And timeframe estimate, we're looking at early June to mid-June when those appeal periods are exhausted. And so the city will begin to implement the program after those appeals are exhausted.
And how long do you think it'll take to do the 3-mile stretch?
So in the proposal, the striping could be almost overnight. So once we procure the contractor to go ahead and do that, it'll be pretty quick. As far as the pay stations are concerned, that those do take a little bit more time, but they're luckily off on the side of the road on the sidewalk areas. Staff and or contractors will be able to do that within a couple of days. We do have to procure some additional pay stations as part of this program, And so that might take a little bit longer, but the necessary signs will be installed as the pay stations are installed.
And the pay stations are solar, so there's no infrastructure.
Correct. The whole goal of this is to be temporary and be able to remove it, reuse it for other purposes if this is not successful.
Thank you. Okay, my second set of questions are the details. What is the rough order of magnitude number of spaces bracketed that is now being parked in the project area? So in other words, what's the delta between that number and this 501 new spaces?
Yeah, Commissioner White, I struggled with quantifying that. And the reason I say that is because at the moment, a lot of people are illegally parking. And I don't want to add how much stalls we have out there based on how many people are parking illegally or packing themselves in. So that's really unquantifiable at the moment. However, with this program and the standardization of the legal parking and standardized parking with all the regulations, what you see forth is the baseline. And so we could always add or decrease based on our findings down the road, but that is our baseline, and that would be the number that we are currently at.
Okay. And so half the spaces are free, roughly half are metered. And that has to do with sidewalk access to a metered pay station. I think that's important for everybody to understand. The concern, there was a mention in the presentation about addressing pedestrian crossing on Coast Highway. How is that? That's extremely nerve-wracking when I see that happening, and it happens all the time. How is that being addressed in this project?
Absolutely. And I think the first and foremost part is the daylighting laws. We want to clear the corners to allow for that better visibility of the pedestrians. The other is where there are pay stations, they are going to migrate towards the coastal access areas. They're going to be forced to go to those areas and cross at those intersections. So that is very strategic on our part. I understand that there are areas that we will not have pay stations due to the accessibility needs in regards to where the pay stations are located without a sidewalk. That's the concern we have. And so it'll still be similar to the status quo, but at least now you have a more predictable behavior and visual cues for folks parking in the general area, providing a little bit more legalized space to provide a little bit more visibility of where those pedestrians will be on the roadway.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I accept your explanation, but I don't think it's going to change the behavior. And and how do we, we can't control that, but are we in any way, I mean, this isn't something for us to determine, but city attorney, are we in any way putting the city in a worse off position than we are now by doing these improvements in terms of liability?
So in terms of liability, it's hard to opine unequivocally. Each of these cases is really a case-by-case analysis in terms of what did the potential claimant know and not know. Were they directed? Was there construction? Was there direction? So no, from a overarching standpoint, I cannot sit up here and say that if this project were to go forward, the city would be exposed to more liability unequivocally. Sure, with new improvements, if something bad were to happen, I guess potentially new tripping concerns. So I also can't say that no, there wouldn't be any lawsuits, but no, if we thought that this would expose us to, unequivocally more liability, excuse me, we wouldn't be here tonight.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, about the residential streets, this pilot program is just 165 feet up into the neighborhoods on the neighborhood streets. And you're not touching anything else further on. So there won't be any marking, striping, any intervention on the rest of these residential streets. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm not, okay, I want to hear what the public has to say and my fellow commissioners, but there's a lot of controversy around the residential streets, and, you know, I want to be sure we really have enough information here tonight to make a decision on moving forward with that piece of the project. Thank you.
Commissioner Dupin.
First of all, I did meet with the applicant team from the city.
We don't have to.
Yeah. Yes, I met with Tran.
I don't think we needed to disclose that for a city project, do we?
Okay.
I mean, once again, the only need for disclosure is if you learn something outside of the staff report during the meeting. So,
Which I did.
I spoke with city staff as well then.
So my first question is, how many trees are getting cut down? Trying to lighten the thing up.
For the record, 0.
Do you expect, as far as the data collected over the first 90-day period, do you feel that'll be sufficient to determine whether the project should be permanently entitled or modified or canceled altogether?
From a traffic safety standpoint, absolutely. I think the 90 days is sufficient to address what the main purpose of this project is, and we could justify the after study in regards to what the findings will be. I suspect that we will be maintaining and permanently maintaining the striping or the marked Ts on Coast Highway.
Okay. I know, like, you know, we've all heard from South Laguna residents for years about enforcement issues down there. Like, people are parking in front of their driveways all over the streets down there. And, you know, they call the cops and, you know, they may show up or they don't. And it's been a problem for decades, basically. As far as the enforcement issue, I know you mentioned that you have been speaking with the PD, but do they have the personnel available to, you know, we're creating, you know, 3 miles of now enforceable parking environment, you know, is there enough enthusiasm and personnel from the PD to actually be more engaged, not only with the residents, but with the whole parking program in general?
Unequivocally, the Laguna Beach Police Department is on board with this program. And so they will be putting a lot of attention to this for its success. However, I would like to pause on in regards of the additional resources as we find more concerns that might come up through the analysis and the study that we will see, whether or not some of the potential revenue generations could offset some additional parking enforcement officers.
So you know, I know we're not really here to speak about budget, but as far as the cost of the pilot program, you mentioned that potentially it's kind of a break even, at least in the first year, but you feel after that there will be some revenue that will go to maybe solving some other problems, not only just in South Laguna, but elsewhere in the city.
Correct. And that's something that we feel that based on kind of the experience and kind of the parking revenues that we received up in North Laguna and things of that nature, that we feel that if this was to be a successful implementation, the first year would be a wash.
So in terms of the timeline for implementation, there are obviously the appeal periods that are involved, and then also getting Caltrans to sign off on this. You mentioned that as far as the pay stations go, that you only have 2 to put in place, where, you know, I think the program is calling out for 22 pay stations along the 3-mile stretch. And those probably will not be in place through the summer, is what I'm understanding. So at that point, you're talking about a phone app or something so that people can pay on their phones. And is your sense that that's going to be successful? Because, you know, people, you know, not everybody is proficient, you know, especially us older people, proficient with phone apps. You know, I mean, I'm guessing there might be a lot of people who just blow it off and are willing to roll the dice on getting a ticket. What is your feeling on that?
Like I said, I think our Laguna Beach Police Department is going to be highly visible for this pilot program. And so we want to make sure that those that are parking there are complying. And so we're going to do our best to make sure that those are being not only enforced, but as well as being compliant in regards of turnover. So
So in other words, the base stations, just hitting on that for a second, probably we're looking at maybe September before you actually get enough of them to place around the 3-mile stretch of.
correct, but the ones that we do have would give us enough data to kind of support the rest of the program.
Okay. And I have a question on page 22 of the staff report. It's finding number 3, where it states there will be no detrimental effects on the surrounding properties. I know, let me just finish. South Laguna neighbors have obviously, as I stated earlier, been impacted by folks parking in the neighborhood. So how does staff make this finding, knowing that ongoing parking issues in the neighborhoods and the neighbors have been dealing with for years? Can you please explain how this program will not be detrimental to the residents?
I think what we understand is that the parking demand is already at maximum peak levels during the summertime. And so we're not actually changing that condition. What we are proposing is to install clear delineated parking spaces to retain order in those areas for the safety aspect. And so that's the lens that staff is looking at this.
But I mean, I'm just going to state that, when you create, you're creating a paid parking program, and especially on the residential, the first block of some of the residential streets, you don't feel like there's still going to be a number of people from the public and visitors that are going to go, well, I'm not going to pay the $17.50 for the 5-hour duration. I'm going to drive up in the neighborhood and see if I can find a place to park. Do you feel that's not going to happen with this program?
Well, what we understand is those are the existing conditions today, that folks are already at max demand going up into residential neighborhoods. And so we're not changing that. What we're proposing is just to install the markings and essentially create orderly parking in those areas.
Okay, well,
Commissioner, if I may.
yeah.
I think we want to distinguish that the inland parking that we're proposing, specifically the residential areas, I believe it's going to be 7th Street and beyond, is unmetered. So I just want to distinguish those two areas. There's metered and there's unmetered residential commercial retail. So with those different components to it, like Alyssa was saying, we feel that this is the starting point of a conversation, and it's not going to be the end of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think we want to work collaboratively with the community in regards to does it work for them or not. But I think it addresses some of the key factors of overall traffic safety, like I mentioned in our slide, that there's going to be now proper parking on each side in regards to the street width. So I think a lot of us have seen up and down these general areas, specifically the first block, that's your main ingress and egress to Coast Highway. And so from a traffic safety standpoint, you want to clear those areas, especially with the widths. And the widths that are out there today vary, but there are areas where there's about 26 feet wide, and it is displayed and shown on our staff report as in the conceptual design that currently have parking on both sides with two-way traffic traveling through that. That is not ideal, and that is definitely not standard. And so us providing some, I would say, rearrangements of those areas will allow for a little bit more of the safe movement of not only the vehicles that's going up and down this area, but also emergency personnel. So I do see that there is a public benefit in this, and that's why there's a couple things that we would like to address, and I think that's how the statement that was stated in the staff report is valid.
Okay, sorry, did you want to add on to something there? Or?
Yeah, just one more question on the residential streets. Upland, is Upland metered, Eagle Rock, First and Second?
Yeah, just for the record, let's, if you don't mind, if I go through each street one by one. So Upland is proposed with metering. Catalina is proposed with metering. Eagle Rock Way is proposed with metering. Second Avenue is proposed with metering. Third Avenue is proposed with metering, and the rest is not proposed for metering, so unpaid. So 4th, 5th, 9th, and 10th is not proposed metering.
But the metering is variable. It's a variable. You could remove the requirement of putting metering in those streets that you're proposing to meter. Is that correct?
If the planning commission recommends that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more quick question that's related to public safety, but it's also public safety for the police department parking enforcement folks. You know, especially the stretch along Aliso Beach, you know, obviously that's people do speed there all the time. And I'm just envisioning, you know, the meter folks and, you know, in their Cushman or whatever, driving along that section of road, checking meters in one of the traffic lanes. Have you talked to them about, you know, how they're going to go about enforcing the metered program, not just there, but all along Coast Highway, in terms of, are they going to be getting out of a vehicle and walking on the sidewalk side to check meters, or are they going to be doing it in their Cushman? Or I'm just concerned, as I'm sure they should be, about, you know, potentially getting rear-ended or, you know, getting injured while checking the meters. What have you been talking to? I know you've been talking to the PD, but I mean, have you been getting input from the people who are actually going to be the enforcement agents for this program?
Absolutely. So it's no different than when someone's getting pulled over, or we're doing it currently today. They're going to put their lights and sirens or the lights on to indicate that they're in the general area. They're going to park in an area that's safe for them, and then proceed down and identify the vehicles. As the long-term parking management program proceeds and goes on, we will be evaluating other technologies that would make them less vulnerable in that situation. But at the moment, we have discussed this with the police department, and they are confident that they are able to enforce those areas safely.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks. A number of my questions were already answered. One question I had.
Can I ask a couple more?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I just want to confirm that. Well, let me ask this question: if there was a hybrid, where I understand there's really kind of two issues here in my mind. One is the articulation of the parking spaces, so that people park in, you know, adequate space and distance and locations that kind of make sense. And then the other is the whole control of the hours and the metering. Is there a hybrid where you still articulated the parking spaces on the residential side streets so that they're legal and safer to utilize, but not regulate them in terms of hours or in terms of metering?
If that's a recommendation of the planning commission, we could certainly consider that.
The other question relates to this whole issue of only the meter stations on PCH. Is there sufficient space for people to walk on the inland side of the cars to get to the metering stations, or will they have to be forced to walk on the traffic side?
Thank you, Chair. And that's a great question. So we strategically identified where those pay stations are. I think we mentioned previously that the pay stations are located where there is existing sidewalk or some type of pathway towards those pay stations that is accessible in nature. In addition to that, those areas that are unmetered and no pay stations, we are looking to reduce the vegetation on that edge, and so that it'll be a little bit easier for those that get out of the passenger side to be able to get out and traverse that area.
And then it sounded like for a while, at least during this testing period, there would not be as many pay stations because I guess they're expensive and complicated to install. And then you would be using an app. And I've used to me, it should be 100% app, you know, because I think the walking around to pay stations around PCH is just asking for it. But I know that when I do use an app to park, I need to be informed as to where to go, how to use the app and put in the right text message or however the app is being utilized. And it would seem to me that would require quite a bit of signage to educate users on how to use the app. Is that being anticipated?
Yeah, we could certainly.
Or am I misunderstanding the app? Am I misunderstanding the app usage?
No, I think that is appropriate, and I think we're going to work with our PIO and social media to provide a little bit more information on how to utilize these areas. I think there's going to be a public campaign in regards to noticing the public in how to navigate these general areas.
Because you almost have to be staring at the instructions while you're doing it. Otherwise, I don't know. I just want to identify that as an issue. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, most of my questions have been answered. One question I had is, you had mentioned that during one of the earlier community outreach meetings, you met with some of the local business owners, and because of that, the plan was adjusted to allow some of the parking areas near the businesses to remain as is. In addition to that, have you had any discussions with some of the business owners about how they're currently dealing with employee parking and how this may affect employee parking? I mean, right now, with the current situation, with large stretches of unmetered areas where people could park, I'm guessing that a certain percentage of the spaces are being utilized by employees. Is there any plan, or has there been any discussions about what's going to happen? Where are those employees going to park?
Yeah, in that town hall meeting on April 21st, we did hear from community members and business owners, and as well as the public comment letters. We did have one public comment letter that expressed concerns about staff parking, and also they expressed that their staff already has a difficult time parking. There's not space on site. One thing that they recommended was that perhaps trolley service or some sort of shuttle service where staff can park at like a city-owned parking lot, for example. But that would be something that would need to be worked out individually with the business owners. Another concern that was mentioned is that their staff is already parking in residential areas, for example. And so I don't believe that this project would change those conditions. However, the city is understanding that there is already a shortage in where their staff can park.
Okay, because I know there's been discussions in the past about employee shuttle programs and things like that, but currently there is no city-run program like that. Am I correct?
That is correct. That would be quite an expensive service for the city to provide. So that's not something that's currently available to Laguna Beach merchants or their employees. I will say that in terms of parking access, the duration limits would result in some turnover of those spaces, making spaces periodically available over the course of a given day.
Okay. And there was some question from some of the public comments about the adequacy of the environmental review of this program and whether or not a CEQA exemption is appropriate. And part of the explanation and discussion of our staff in our staff report about it was pointing to this being a temporary or pilot program in nature, and that's part of the reason why it's suggesting that it have this CEQA exemption. If the Planning Commission was to move ahead with this program, either as currently proposed or modified, and we found for this CEQA exemption, based in part because it's a temporary program, would that in any way set a precedence for us or preclude us in the future when this, if this was to come back and come back before us for a permanent program to reevaluate that CEQA exemption and somehow, you know, be able to find that it is a CEQA exempt because it, as currently presented as a temporary program. However, taking a fresh look at that when it's a permanent program.
Those are two distinct discretionary actions that the Planning Commission would take. The CEQA exemption is for the pilot program. Should the city apply for design review and a coastal development permit for some type of permanent program in the future, that would be subject to its own CEQA analysis. The staff may or may not recommend the same determination by this body. I think at that time we'll also have a lot of data to support whatever recommendations we do provide to the Planning Commission. But at this time, based on the analysis in the staff report, staff does believe that this proposed project qualifies for a categorical exemption from CEQA. The nature of the roadway is not changing through compliance with state daylighting laws. The marking of parking spaces to be code compliant, standardized. We do see a greater sense of order being introduced to the right-of-way. I think, as Tran mentioned, as Alyssa mentioned, first and foremost, this program's #1 priority is public safety, and that was a key consideration in this analysis as well.
Okay.
And so just to follow up on that, absolutely not. That any determination tonight would not tie your hands in the future, would not prescribe any CEQA determination in the future. That would be looked at entirely independently and new, as explained by Mr. Director, based on any additional data, lived experience, or project modifications, should it come to that.
Okay, I felt that to be the case, but I wanted that clarified. That answers my questions at this time. Any other questions?
Yeah, could I, temporary chair, can I follow up on
Sure,
Kellenberg?
absolutely.
As far as the app goes, I was recently up in Anaheim at a parking structure that required you to use an app, and there was a QR code and whatnot. And, you know, me being only kind of adept at technology, you know, I tried to follow it, and it literally took me 15 minutes to get to the point of paying for my parking there. But the other thing that happened is they also, you know, some of these apps, they force you to try to force you to sign up for other things. And my question is, if you know, because of the lack of pay stations, at least initially, the people will be paying with an app, and I don't know if there's IT within the city that will create a specialized app for that, or is it something you just reach out into the general world to find a parking app that, you know, you think will work with signs that have QR codes on them that won't be so cumbersome for the public to use? Because, you know, for me, I was ready to just go, well, I'll risk getting a ticket, because it was so frustrating having to try to go through this lengthy process to pay for a parking spot. So what is your feeling on this parking app that's going to be part of the program?
Yeah, the city would implement the same parking app that we currently utilize today throughout the city. So it would be the same technology, the same parking app, the same QR codes that are presented in the staff report, for example. All along the city, we have these pay by phone, wayfinding signage that says where to park, for example. So all of those would utilize the same existing technology that currently is used throughout the city.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, Commissioner Kellenberg?
No, thank you.
Okay, I will open the public hearing for public comment. Anybody who wishes to speak, please come up to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. After you're done speaking, if you could print your name on the list that's behind you on the table, just so that we get your spelling of your name correct for the minutes of the meeting. And there's some lights there that'll indicate your time. When it's green, you're going. When it's yellow and you hear the first beep, that means you have 30 seconds left. When it starts flashing red, your time's up and move on. All right.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Brian Minna. I'm a resident in our neighborhood. I presented the graphic of our neighborhood. It's the most effective neighborhood in the entire city of Laguna Beach. We have more impacts from all different medias, social media, from the hotels, the hotels. Anyway, the whole basis of this study doesn't make any sense when they're going to not know how many spaces we started with. That is not a quantitative study when you don't know. I talked to Tran, I met with Alyssa. They said they're gonna lose spaces. They haven't quantified it. So any space lost is another one that's coming in my neighborhood. Let me tell you that. They're gonna go from 22 spaces where they're squeezing in, you know, three cars, there's gonna be 2. So they're gonna lose a third of the parking on Coast Highway just to this program alone. They are gonna come into our neighborhood. I presented some graphics. I think I emailed it to you. My neighborhood here is 208 homes. We have 79 finite parking spaces. That's less than 0.4 parking spaces per unit. Anybody who knows any planning, as I've done for 50 years, is that each house should have 1 guest space. Most of the homes in this neighborhood don't have parking garages. Okay, so they're on the street. So this general term is, well, these spaces are already taken, but we go to the store, we come back, we don't have a space. So the pressure is on all day, the pressure is on 8 hours. It's not a 5-hour. So the assumptions of the 5-hour study is completely erroneous to the existing use by the public. They come for all day, they come at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, they leave at sunset and watch the sun go down. So to say it's just an automatic 5-hour, it's just gonna increase the safety concerns, to increase the jaywalking coming across, moving your car, because you have to stagger your car. You have to come back up 216 stairs to go get another space. It's not logical. The assumptions that are being made by this study, it's just, you know, we went and spoke to them. They didn't include any of our stuff. They went to the commercial people and they included their 1.5 hour. We cannot live without a 72-hour in our residential neighborhoods. We need to pull sheet 24, 8th and 9th Street off of this. We are the most impacted. So in 30 seconds, let me tell you that we preserved these spaces in 2001 through the parking traffic safety. This is second chance I'm being punished to go through this and lose my parking spaces. Harbors Beaches Park never gave us any parking spaces when they opened this up to public. They took it from our property deeds. The added revenue, the added pressure by Instagram hotspots, by Visit Laguna, it's just untenable. We can't live with this residential area being added. I would implore you to make this study 8-hour that represents the actual use of a beach user and no limits within the residential. It's only 2 streets you have to pull. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again. My name's Tom Addis. I'm a resident of South Laguna Beach, and I'm happy that the city is actually addressing some of the issues that we have down in that area. When you think about the criteria for success for this program, I just want to add one thing. Think about transit times. You didn't bring that up. When you turn the corner in Crown Valley and just go to Vista,
Try to address the planning commission.
it'll take 10 minutes just to go that distance. So I think you should add that because transit time should make it, this project should make a difference there. If it doesn't, we probably didn't have success. But I'd also like to highlight another issue that's a safety concern, and I hope the city council will consider, and the planning commission will consider this as part of the project. Near the Dana Point Laguna Beach border, there is about a 50-yard gap where there's no sidewalk on either side of the highway. And most people have to walk in a 2-foot span area for about 50 yards against traffic that is traveling 50 miles against you because there is no sidewalk. So pedestrians, families, joggers, neighbors, they use this corridor on a regular basis and are walking on the highway. This gap creates an ongoing and unnecessary risk. What makes this especially troubling is that Caltrans and Laguna Beach have made a commendable citywide effort to bring sidewalks into ADA compliance, yet this stretch was overlooked entirely. Today, a person using a wheelchair or a mobility aid has no safe option. They literally have to go into the traffic lane just to go continue down either north or south on that part of the highway. So they cannot navigate the section without entering traffic, and it's a safety failure. It's an accessibility failure, and one that the city has the ability to correct. I'd also like the City Council to consider the broader context. The south entrance to Laguna Beach along Pacific Coast Highway has roughly 30% more vehicle traffic than the Laguna Canyon entrance. And we've spent over the last few years over $1 million just on studies in that area to look at putting up everything from signs welcoming people to Laguna to other little areas to park. This is a really simple project. It's 50 yards of sidewalk, it's landscaping, and it could easily be included in this project because it addresses some of the things that you've brought up around safety and pedestrian safety. So what I wouldn't want to see is a study in this area, just action. You've got neighbors in my area that would pay for it even, but we just need the green light. And I've talked to Caltrans, they've passed it to the city. I've talked to members of the city council, and they've passed it off to other people, and nothing's happened. So I'll work with you. I actually have landscaping plans done, everything from a hardscape plan to the actual vegetation that would need to be cut back. So you've got my email address. I hope somebody reaches out and we can get this project started quickly.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rex Bell. I live on Eagle Rock Way in South Laguna. I'm going to read just a couple of statements that I prepared here. The time-limited parking on the side streets we're opposed to. This would increase turnover with vehicles pulling in and out of parking spaces, potentially blocking cars turning from the PCH onto those side streets. And this could increase risk of accidents and increase liability for the city. Limiting parking on the first blocks of inland streets will cause even more people to seek free parking in our neighborhood, making traffic issues worse than they currently are. And there's wide concern about restricted parking being pushed deeper into the neighborhoods in the future, further impacting residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Mary Ellen Barlow. I live at the corner of Eagle Rock and Virginia Way. And I urge you to not approve this. It is going to impact, South Laguna is high density, and very few of the homes have off-street parking. We don't have off-street parking. I live in a duplex. There's one parking space, 4 people, and we park on Eagle Rock or we park on Monterey. And sometimes our cars are there for 3 or 4 days. So for us to have to have 5-hour limits, and then our neighbors and their sons, they have cars, they park on Monterey. What are they supposed to do? Get up after 5 hours of sleeping, set the alarm, go out and feed their meter again? That's ridiculous. So I think these marked parking spaces are going to exacerbate the parking problems in South Laguna. Not really. They're going to help it for people maybe coming to visit. But people who come to the beach there, if you grew up here, you know South Laguna's got a parking problem. And if you want to go to the beach, you just get there early. It's not a problem. People know what to do. And in the summer, we don't dare go to the grocery store at 10 in the morning because you're not going to get a parking space when you come back. You go at 6:30 at night, then you'll get a parking space. And those times when we are away, I end up parking over at the hospital and walking 5 or 6 blocks. But you have to stop and drop your groceries off first. So it's not going to help anything for us, and we're the residents. So a lot of places don't have a garage and they don't have a driveway. A lot. They're very small, it's very dense, 0 lot line homes. And I just don't think this is the place for it. So the big problem is there's insufficient off-site parking in South Laguna. Alta Laguna, no problem. It's a modern neighborhood, but here a lot of us don't have off-street parking. And the fact that it's only 5 hours is making people stop what they're doing, going out and feed the meter. And we live here. We shouldn't have to do that. So I've got a little graphic here. Where's my graphic? So these are people that I know in my neighborhood. Here's Papa's Tacos, here's PCH, here's that community garden. All the people around here live in small, maybe they rent a room from somebody, or there's an ADU, and there's 8 cars that park there because there's no parking at the house unless and most of them have just one space out front, maybe 2. So I urge you to not approve this proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anna Marie Goddard. I live on Virginia Way, and I actually agree with everything Marianne just said. We have the same problem. My house was built in 1947. We have barely one carport for one car. My son moved back from Hawaii, so he has a car, but so he parks on 10th Avenue. Now he's going to be charged for that. I have an employee, where is she going to park? But as well as when we all on Virginia Way need a plumber or a painter or somebody, to work on the house, we always say park on 10th Avenue, but now they're going to be, charged for that. So I suggest, which I don't know if it's been brought up, but there's a whole stretch on Sunset Avenue behind the hospital going up 8th, so north of 8th Avenue. A lot of beachgoers park there, put the meters there. I don't think it's going to, be any problem for anybody that I know. But anyway, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kyle Scott. I live on the corner of Virginia Way and 10th Avenue along with my wife, Jackie, and we're new residents. We just moved in on March 17. We got this notice. And regarding the issue of the inconvenience and the hardship, it would directly affect us. Our property, even though it's a 2 or 3 bedroom house with 1 bathroom only, but we have a garage which is unusable. We have a driveway in our property behind a gate that we use to park on. And we also park on 10th Avenue, exactly where some of this designated free parking would be located. So that would create an inconvenience every single day for us. We'd have to move one of our cars every 5 hours. So that would directly impact us. The other issue I wanted to present is the issue, I think that the council person from Vietnam, whether there was any liability. I'm a personal injury attorney. I've been doing it for 34 years. I've sued the state of California for dangerous conditions of property, for intersections and things of that nature. And every time we drive up to our property through we access it mostly through Crown Valley and drive up PCH, I see all the people parked along PCH, standing next to their cars with their little kids, with their beach chairs, trying to negotiate just to get up to a safe place to cross, and walking literally in the number 2 lane of PCH going north from my perspective. I think it right now is a very dangerous condition. And, the dangerous condition law is pretty clear. As a public entity, you don't have to own that property. You just have to control it. And in fact, you don't even have to control it to have liability. In this situation where you're adding another factor, first of all, if you really wanted to make those roadways safe, you wouldn't have 2 lanes. You'd have 1 lane in each direction, and you would have a pedestrian bicycle lane like we do back in Irvine. And then that way, then you have a buffer between traffic and people. But that being said, I guess that's the state of California that's controlling the number of lanes. But you're now introducing another act that a person that wants to park there has to do. They have to take their phone and they have to find something with a QR code to scan. So now they're distracted. Now they're doing that, not watching the kid. I think there's potential for liability for the city of Laguna Beach by enacting this program where you have to do something else which is already a dangerous condition, something that's distracting, something that's taking your attention away from traffic that's traveling towards you. And then lastly, I would just add too, in this area, so Vista del Sol to our street, 10th Avenue, is 0.6 miles. There's no, so people that are parking along that distance have to walk quite a ways to even get to a corner where, you know, it's an inferred crosswalk. You don't have to have a marked crosswalk, but there is no marked crosswalk at 10th. There is one with a light at 9th, which everybody uses to go to 1,000 Steps Beach. And then at 8th Avenue, there is absolutely no crosswalk there. In fact, there's a sign that tells you don't cross at 8th Avenue because it's dangerous. So you have very limited crosswalks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I might need to sit down to talk, but Paul Merritt, and I represent Woods Cove Association, Clater and Lockwood, and 22 residents in Central Laguna near Diamond Street. To add to the joke, I've never seen a parking meter that was planted that was cut down or got a fungus. So if the city really thinks with a straight face that we think this is a pilot project, we need to really reconsider. The city attorney has incompletely advised the Planning Commission because our legal research shows that when there is multiple interaction between government agencies, Caltrans and the Coastal Commission, you're required to do a CEQA report, plain and simple. So they didn't go the mile in looking into that, and that should be a slippery slope. Failure to provide notice. We got notice at Woods Cove 9 days ago. We never were allowed to know about or attend or invited to any town hall meetings. We always thought this was a South Laguna issue until 5 weeks ago when one of the people at City Hall decided to extend the parking meter zone all the way up to near Diamond Street. We got no public adequate notice. But whether our thoughts and objections on this issue are taken or not taken, that's not the real issue. The real issue is there is a contract, and the April 2nd city letter shows that you have a contract between the State Coastal Commission called the Local Coastal Plan. And in 2011, you got a quid pro quo. We, the city, got a quid pro quo. We got restricted parking around Mozambique 4 blocks. This letter is crystal clear in the second to the last paragraph. There shall be no additional preferential residential parking, period. That means the stickers won't work. You can't sell them. You can't use them. There will be chaos in the city. And on top of that, the 4 blocks around Mozambique will be rejected as a violation of the agreement in 2011 between the city and the Coastal Commission. And by the way, we've tried to communicate with the Coastal Commission. They haven't answered their phones for over 10 days. And when I went up with a process server yesterday to the headquarters, they were closed for 4 days in violation of the state government code. The governor never approved the closure of the Long Beach Coastal Commission. So it's been impossible to communicate this issue with anybody except the good listeners on your city staff. Again, we ask that you kill this idea. It's a business killer. It's a resident obstruction issue. And it's unfair that we had no notice. Thank you.
Thank you.
And here's a copy of the letter.
We got
I
it.
think we gave some out to staff.
We got it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tamar Balian, and I live in South Laguna on Florence between 3rd and 4th. And before I prepared a statement for you, but before I read that, I'd like to ask you, Have you ever wondered when you drive by PCH and you're passing CVS, why they always have a security guard in the parking lot and signs that say no beach parking, yet there are metered parking on PCH? It's because everybody wants free parking and they'll try to get away with it. I understand the city is trying to address congestion, circulation and coastal access, and I appreciate the effort to find a solution. However, I strongly believe this proposal will create unintended consequences for the residential neighborhoods immediately surrounding the Coast Highway. The city's own staff report acknowledges concerns about spillover into adjacent residential neighborhoods and states that one purpose of this pilot program is to study those impacts. The concern is not hypothetical, it is actually very predictable. Beachgoers will find free parking before they pay for the beach. By installing metered parking on PCH and along some of the roads, parking regulation changes up to 165 feet inland on different streets, the city is effectively pushing parking demand toward residential streets like Florence and beyond. Visitors who do not want to pay fees on PCH who hit the 5-hour limit will eventually naturally begin searching deeper into our neighborhoods. This is human behavior. The proposal also establishes the 5-hour rule. Beachgoers that come to the beach bring everything with them. They bring their coolers, their chairs, their umbrellas, their blankets. They come very early in the morning and they leave very late at night. Placing meters on PCH and restricting the hours that they can park there will only enforce or force them to run up again across PCH, which is dangerous. Now they're doing it twice to feed a meter and then go back down to the beach. I live on the second floor and I watch in the summer throughout the week beachgoers going down Florence, going fast on my street trying to get that free parking. And if you install metered parking, all you're going to do is force all those beachgoers to go further into our neighborhoods, get more aggressive because they're like, oh, let's go around the corner. Maybe there's a free parking there. It is already a problem. Parking is a problem. It's already broken. This will make it worse for the residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Amy Burke. I live at 31559 Eagle Rock Way on the lower side of Eagle Rock. I did not get a notice. We just happened to be part of the South Laguna garage sale this weekend, and someone came and gave me the notice. And I will note that the email that you have for the Planning Commission is wrong on that. So I sent it, it got sent back, and then I had to, one of my neighbors was able to give me the proper email. So I don't know if you were able to hear from everyone. This gentleman said that this is a starting point of a conversation. To me, a pilot program isn't the starting point of a conversation. A conversation is the starting point of a conversation. Nobody came and asked us about this. They went to businesses. They could have easily come to our homes. I am the block captain for the undergrounding on Eagle Rock, and I could have had my co-block captain on West Street, and I could have gotten almost that entire area information to you guys very quickly about this. We've spent 5 years now undergrounding this area to make it beautiful. Finally almost there to now find out that you want to put meters there to now ruin the beautiful aesthetic of our streets. Now we're going to have meter maids coming up and down the block. I personally have a very difficult time parking. For a family of 5, we have 3 cars right now. Because of construction going on the block, or just what, people coming up from the beach, I'm sometimes parking 3 blocks up, just that my 3rd car. And I have to be conscious right now because you can't have a car there for too many days. I can't even imagine now with people now coming up from the beach, they're not going to want to pay for the metered parking. They're going to come into our streets. Does that mean my gardener is going to have to come now and pay to park as someone who comes and does plumbing work for me? I mean, there's a lot of construction going on our block. We only have one side parking as is. I can't even imagine how this would happen. No one wants to have board meetings at my house. They're like, no, let's not go to her house because it's impossible to park. Can you imagine now they're going to come there and they're going to pay $3.50 an hour? It just, to me, it doesn't seem right. And I don't know how you can test the efficacy of this program with accident. They said that they're going to look at accidents in our area, and that's going to how they're going to test this. I don't know how you can test it that way. I'm an attorney as well, and the first thing I thought about is the liability that you're going to have from this, of people walking into the street, of having meter maids stopping. And I guess, as someone mentioned, that the police are often stopping people anyway. Police don't stop people along that stretch there. If there's a ticket, which usually that's not where we have any sort of regulation of that, they're going to pull somebody up. To have meter maids stopping on the street, that's where you're going to have an accident. Most of our accidents that we have are with the crosswalk and people not paying attention. Can you imagine now if they're not paying, even now, they're really going to be looking, oh, where can I park? Which one's free? Which one isn't? It's just, I think it adds a whole nother level of difficulty for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Bell, 31558 Eagle Rock Way. Couple of questions and a comment. What are the risks of kids on bikes and skateboards hitting those parking meter kiosks while they're riding up and down on the sidewalks in front of the taco store, or trying to get a donut or something? I see that as a liability and something that wasn't mentioned. The other thing is which was just mentioned, the meter maids will tie up traffic, and there will be, broadside accidents that occur. Currently, I see them nearly weekly. And then finally, with 165 feet going up the side streets, the average Kia is 13 feet long. That would mean that we could cram 10 Kias in that space. Well, right now, I live there. I could look at it every day. There's only 4 or 5 cars parked from the corner to Virginia. So that 6.5 feet is probably unrealistic. 165 feet is unrealistic to think that we're going to get any reasonable amount of parking in there.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aaron Peluso, and I live above the Montage, Wesley. If I understand correctly, that the idea here is to stripe but not meter up to 165 feet into the neighborhoods, and then put a 5-hour time limit as some sort of, fix to the insane parking problems we have in South Laguna. I don't think I think you're more likely to get a riot down here than you are anything else if you start handing out tickets for people parking in front of their houses like they have for generations. Our residential neighborhoods are not a place for public parking for 5-hour limits, so that we can encourage turnover for coastal access. So I think we need to look hard about that. That said, before COVID, before Instagram, viral Instagram memes and so forth, I would have agreed with the majority of the people here standing here behind me, the fine people standing here behind me. But the way that it is right now, I think that the fact of the matter is that we reach parking capacity very quick in South Laguna. And it is true that people will seek out the free parking. In my neighborhood, we have the first block of Wesley. It has been for a long time. It's actually metered. And I observe it. It goes on to Maryland at 9 a.m. And then at 10:30, it's all parked out and everybody's parking everywhere. So there is a time shift there associated with pushing people into the neighborhood. But at the end of the day, my neighborhood's entirely parked out every weekend, sunny day when the weather's nice. There is one thing that I haven't heard discussed publicly, which is the leader, I don't know his name, the commissioner, the guy on Zoom or on the phone. He had mentioned residential parking passes for pay for the visitors, and residential people get a pass. I understand that that's not a possibility. But if there were paid parking in the neighborhoods, is more long-term, not really for tonight, but if there were paid parking in the neighborhoods and it was in 5-hour parking and it was enforced from 11 to 4 and our shoppers permits worked, then I think we would accomplish the goal of getting revenue out of the neighborhoods and discouraging the public parking up into the neighborhood, and still have people able to park in front of their houses. I don't know. There's probably some coastal commission rule against that. Just make sure I got everything here. I'm a little confused as to why we aren't going a little harder on the paid parking on PCH, why it's primarily coastal side only. I think we could do, I think we could, there are some areas there that still have walkways that are similar to the canyon and some other areas that are not being touched. And I don't know why, I don't understand why that is. And the last thing I just want to mention real quick was in the presentation, there was a picture of a guy jaywalking across the street, right behind a car with all these cars lined up on PCH. And I just found it ironic that that's actually on the inland side of Aliso, where it's all painted red. And so you can make all the rules that you want, but we need some enforcement because all those people were parked illegally anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Nick Aronoff, a fourth generation Laguna Beach resident. I grew up in South Laguna, Three Arch Bay, and Victoria Beach. So, I don't live down there at the moment now. I live in the canyon, but I still go to Victoria Beach every day. That's like my, my home beach. And so, seeing the way that parking's changed a lot over the years, especially as the previous speaker mentioned with social media, we've reached capacity. So, I understand the feeling that the residents have. When I lived down at Victoria Beach, we would get ticketed parking in front of our own house, and that was like not okay. But we're at a point where it's like something has to change. And what we need to figure out is this the first step in many changes to eventually get to the point where we could potentially get resident parking in the neighborhoods? That's something that we all as residents would like to understand, because if that's possible down the road, and this is the first speed bump in potentially getting to that end goal, then maybe this is something that we could all agree upon. And the main issue right now is also where I see is where we're allocating these paid spots. So it looks like there's 500 total spots that are going to be created. Half of them are going to be roughly 200 free, roughly 200 metered. So it sounds like we need to be very strategic about where we put these metered parking, because if we're going to put them and they have to pay for themselves, then they need to be in areas where people are actually going to use them. So one of the areas that I found that is a big highlight to me, as the speaker here said, is that area between Moss and Upland is not really used every single day when it comes to being filled up, mainly on the weekends when there's overflow, because it's kind of a dead zone if you guys drive through there. So that area, those metered spots being used for that area, it seems like a bit of a waste. I understand the sidewalks are really convenient and nice and large, but that would be better allocated in the area that a lot of people have been concerned about, which is down by Three Arch Bay and in front of 1,000 Steps. But I am very sensitive to their concerns as well, and I understand that going into the neighborhoods should be a very last resort. I think that's something that we should definitely be avoiding. I submitted some video. I don't know if it was available to go up, but if you really look at that area, I don't know if you guys have been down there on a Saturday where you've been able to really attempt to count how many parked cars are there. If you go down there on a Saturday, you really see it. And at this point, if we're worried about liability, which other speakers have brought up, which are good points, then we might as well red the whole thing on the north end of PCH between Three Arch Bay and 9th Street. But the area on the coastal side does have space on the other side of the railing to add paid parking and have enough space for people to get by. One other concern as well, when you add the paid parking in Victoria Beach area, which I'm in favor of, if you don't have those pay stations and we're using the app only, well, if you've been over there, the signal is really bad. So that's not going to work by only being on your cell phone to be able to pay, because then no one's going to be able to pay. They're going to get a ticket. They're going to come down here, contest the ticket. What's the point of it? And like the previous speaker ended, I'm going to end the same way. None of this is even, this whole thing is pointless if we don't have enforcement. And if we don't get the police officers down there and the parking services, the park rangers, none of this even is, the whole thing is pointless. And we have a huge enforcement problem. So if they can't enforce the amount of spots now, as I believe one of the commissioners said, how are they going to enforce all these new additional spots? So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tori Mena. I'm a lifelong resident of Laguna Beach. Every year, the parking situation is getting worse. Residents are already jockeying cars every single day during the peak seasons in order to facilitate guest parking and our own parking due to the resident parking spot deficit that is existing. As it was stated, there is no known delta of this pilot program, and just for reference, you could have taken the linear feet of the streets affected by this pilot program, divided by 22 to get some sort of number. Where is that number? And one side of PCH south of Fifth Avenue doesn't even have a sidewalk for pay station access. It's critically tight right there, and whenever there's traffic, it's always like people walking on that sidewalk from Thousand Steps to their cars, and it's dangerous as is. They have their boogie boards, they have their wide beach chairs, and you have to almost swerve into the fast lane just to avoid them when you're driving in the slow lane. How do you expect residents to have to deal with time limits and further reduced parking spots when there are already cars circling the neighborhood every minute of the day during peak seasons? Where is the data that shows this will be a benefit to the residents of South Laguna? The traffic consultants mentioned should have been studying existing parking conditions to serve as a baseline instead of subjecting us to a one-year experiment. I think it is time to begin negotiations with coastal commissions to try and find a middle ground to grant resident parking permits, maybe by creating more free parking available at the hospital, or by not including the residential neighborhoods inland of PCH in this pilot program. And then echoing, yeah, there is no enforcement. You call parking services to get a car ticketed, half the time that person is already gone by the time parking services gets there. There's no towing happening. You just got to live with the problems living in South Laguna. It's a beautiful place, but we have our problems with parking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Greg Viviani, 41-year resident in South Laguna Beach. My family's been in South Laguna since the 30s and 40s. My dad grew up here, and we didn't have this parking problem when he was a kid in South Laguna. Obviously, social media is a huge factor. I don't know if you guys are pretty connected to like TikTok and so forth, but there is people that are deliberately posting videos showing, hey, you can park up for free in the residential neighborhoods with millions of views to go to the hidden pools and the Pirate Tower and all these places that are blowing up on social media. So I would say that metered parking is needed, but if there's a residential permit type of situation for the residents that obviously everybody's, very concerned about. I have seen my whole life people parking in front of our house on PCH, and multiple car accidents have happened. Some that weren't even on the, the sheet that, showed where all the car accidents had happened in the last few years. And there's a certain section of road where there's like, maybe space for 3 or 4 cars, and like 6 cars cram in there, and then they're parallel parking, they're stopping PC. It's chaos. We all know this. I would say if there's a way to convince the Coastal Commission, because obviously the city's, at a capacity with parking in the peak season, but for safety concerns and for other issues to, I don't know, maybe put a parking structure in the canyon and then have the people shuttled in. I don't know what to do, but to offset for residential parking in certain areas that historically these homes, as people have mentioned, don't have a lot of parking. A lot of the cottage styles homes, they don't have street parking. We're lacking it highly. And so anything to do to help move the needle to, hey, we need to get some type of residential parking permit, but also allow people to park there, but not, charge the residents because they're obviously paying their property tax and whatever else we all pay for. So I would urge something to be further looked into to move that needle, to put more pressure on the Coastal Commission and be like, hey, you guys, this is becoming chaos because our town can't handle the influx of visitors that we are getting. It's like 6 million visitors a year, 7 million visitors. What happens when it's 10 million visitors a year? Like, it's just going to go up and up and up, and we need to have some type of, happy medium. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Loretta Lewis, and I live on the 100 block of Fairview in North Laguna, and I was here to support my cousins who live on 10th. And I would like to address the enforcement issue. This is something that I deal with. I'm in the unmetered part on Fairview. We have meters on Coast Highway. So I have these aggressive drivers coming, trying to put 3 cars where there's 2 cars. Over Easter vacation, I had 2 hit and runs. One car hit a pregnant woman. The other one was trying to vie for a space, T-boned someone else. The T-bone, the police never came. The second one, we had to wait an hour. I've spoken with enforcement. It's not because they don't want to be there. They do an excellent job with their limited resources. They are not the problem. They need more support. We need more people. We need more enforcement. 6 million visitors a year trying to find a place where there's no parking. This is the problem. We need to help enforcement. There is no way that this project can be enforced when they can't even enforce where we have. I've talked with them, and they are so nice in enforcement. They said they have 4 people when this happened over Easter vacation, and they do South Laguna, downtown, and North Laguna. It's not enough. So please, if there's anything in this, it's enforcement and giving them the support they need. So without that, none of this is going to work, and it's not working. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, John Thomas, and I'm mostly speaking on behalf of South Laguna Civic. They sent a letter yesterday. I didn't see it in public comment, so there's a copy. And I'm going to just, rather than read the whole thing, I'll just read a couple excerpts. Our hope is that with careful consideration of this project, the city can reach an outcome that improves safety, manages demand, and delivers meaningful reinvestment in the South community. South Laguna Civic has long supported the principle that visitors to Laguna Beach should contribute more directly to the cost of the infrastructure they use. We also recognize the current conditions along Coast Highway, particularly during peak periods, create safety concerns due to the mix of vehicles, pedestrians, and informal parking patterns. A managed parking system has the potential to improve both safety and organization while generating needed revenue to improve infrastructure. The proposed program, however, raises 2 critical concerns. The first, the likely displacement of parking into surrounding neighborhoods, which many people have mentioned. South Laguna streets are already heavily impacted during peak periods, and it is reasonable to expect that paid parking along Coast Highway will push additional demand in the residential areas. Key concerns beyond changes to the parking volume include whether the potential time limits on residential streets would overly impact residential parking. Second is the resulting revenue, how the resulting revenues to be used. If this program proceeds and becomes permanent, reinvestment should include projects that directly improve safety and address impacts from visitors, such as the completion of critical sidewalk connections, maintenance of evacuation routes, standing community priorities that have remained under invested for years. Missed the expansion of public parks and improvement of street crossings. Anyway, we urge the commission to require that this commitment be established as part of the pilot framework. I'm ad-libbing a little bit now. The T's, I think, are a plus in terms of safety on Coast Highway. The uniform spaces, I think, will reduce some of those rear-end collisions. But there is, I think, a fatal flaw in the design. If I understand it, you got the paid spaces on the ocean side and the unpaid spaces on the inland side, which will motivate people that don't want to pay to first go to the free spaces on the inland side, and then they will be running across the highway. And that was brought up at the Zoom, and it was acknowledged that that is not safe. Finally, the one thing that I want to say is you got to realize this all started with, there was an EIR in 1986 that one of very few EIRs I've ever seen in this area that enabled access to these South Laguna beaches. And that EIR listed everything we're talking about today as deficiencies, and yet they approved the access and never did anything to fund the corrections that were pointed out in that EIR. So if this thing goes forward, some of that funding should be invested in those kinds of corrections to the infrastructure.
Thank you.
Good evening, Pat Minna, 10th and PCH. I take exception, and in all due respect, to our planner who has been on staff 6 months and our assistant city engineer, who's been on staff 30 days. I had personal meetings with them when I got the postcard. When I got the postcard on Saturday, Monday morning, my phone rang to Ms. Suarez to set a meeting. Had a meeting at 2 p.m. After that meeting, it was imperative that we set a meeting with Tran. That happened 2 days later on Wednesday. This is so far above what they understand about our South Laguna. And my house is real interesting because I border Coast Highway. It's a 50 by 100-foot lot. I can sit in my office in our family room. As soon as we retire, it's going back to a family room. And it's a second story. I'm like in a little bird's nest. I can see the bus stop south. I can see past 9th Avenue. And by the way, my husband and I collected 300 signatures back in the old days, 25 years ago, to usher in that 9th Avenue light. Wayne Baglin was at the city council. He got it through. So here's where we really need to go. We were not properly noticed for the stakeholders because of my neighbors that are here, that of the 10, if the neighbors cooperate, we have 10 spaces in that first block. And we all cooperate, and we know within inches how we can park our cars. But the notice period didn't go to the people higher up, because when you impact my first block, we have no other choice but to go further up into the neighborhood. And there was not proper notice to the stakeholders. A question from one of the commissioners was asked about the detrimental to the people. Well, let me tell you, as a licensed real estate broker, licensed since 1986, there's values given. View corridors, ocean view, whitewater, canyon, parking accessibility. How big is your lot? How many cars can you park? Do you have a garage? Do you have a driveway apron? Well, let me tell you, you limit the spaces in front of my house. There's 3 spaces. You are now devaluing my property $300,000 because of my loss of use. And what about when my physical therapist comes because I couldn't drive my car? They had to come to my house, and I'm parked in my driveway. You need to remove the residential streets from the study, and I beg and I implore you, it's not one size fit all, and I thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is that it? All right, I'll close the public hearing. Is there anything that, of the public comments that staff would like to respond to?
Sure, thank you. I'll do my best. Sure do appreciate the public comments. If there are any specific questions of city staff, we are prepared to provide the commission with additional responses to your questions. I guess I'll start by emphasizing that this is a temporary pilot program. I think city staff really understands and appreciates the critical issues in our South Laguna neighborhoods that are being impacted by beach visitors in that area. There is a real parking shortage. That's sincerely felt by the residents. We hear that loud and clear, and that's been well understood by city staff. This pilot program is an attempt to find data-driven solutions if we can. It is a temporary pilot, starting with a 90-day pilot that may potentially be extended to a 1-year program, depending on the data that we receive. One gentleman asked about the sidewalk gap, the 50-yard gap towards the south end of town. It sounds like that was not part of the Caltrans ADA sidewalk improvement project. I don't have any information on that to share this evening, but I would recommend that they set up a time to meet with Mr. Tran, our assistant city engineer, to see what we could possibly do. I will say that this being a state-owned highway, the city has limited control, but we do have a voice, and we do want to understand the local resident need and advocate for that. One thing I wanted to clarify about the hour limits, the 5-hour limit does not apply after 7 p.m. So if, for example, a resident were to park at one of these metered spaces as 5-hour limit spaces at 2 p.m., that limit would expire in 5 hours' time at 7 p.m. Though the hour restriction would not reapply to that space until 8 a.m. the following day. You would not need to move your car in the middle of the night to avoid a parking citation. The 5-hour limit, the reason why that is the limit that was proposed by staff is that that's actually coming directly from Coastal Commission staff. The whole coastal access issue is a balancing act. Coastal Commission staff recognizes that. They believe that a 5-hour limit is sufficient for the typical beachgoer to spend a day at the beach. And so that is the recommendation in your staff report this evening. Regarding deficient notice, city staff can't control when mail is delivered. But as I sit here today, staff does believe that legal notice was provided. Notices were mailed to nearby property owners within the project area. Notice was published in the newspaper. Notices were posted throughout the project area, including at or near public beach access points, where we have a lot of pedestrian activity by the public at large, but also by residents. And there was also a public workshop that was held. Regarding risks of skaters and others possibly hitting pay stations, we have other appurtenances in our right-of-way today. We have parking meters, the more traditional style, rather than these multi-space pay stations. We have trees and tree wells and such. Staff doesn't see an issue here. This is being carefully planned to comply with accessibility requirements, ensuring that there is sufficient clearance to navigate around the pay stations. There was a question that was asked, where is the data that shows that this is a benefit to the residents? And that's precisely why city staff has developed a pilot program to test out. We don't know what the right solution is, but we're keen on trying something. And the data that's derived from the pilot would hopefully show that there is a benefit to the residents. But if it doesn't, the pilot would not be extended. The pilot would not be replaced by a permanent program. We have, over the years, have had conversations with Coastal Commission staff on establishing some type of a resident-only parking program. It's been a non-starter for coastal staff. It doesn't mean staff won't continue to try. There will always be changes at Sacramento, changes at Coastal Commission. At this time, I'm not seeing a solution, but we'll continue to try. The point was well made by Ms. Loretta Lewis that enforcement is a resource problem. We recognize that. For the purposes of this pilot program, city staff is committing resources through its police department to provide parking enforcement for the program. For now, as was stated by the staff presentation, the pilot is projected to be revenue neutral, but there is revenue potential in the long term if the program were to become permanent as proposed, or perhaps through some type of a modification. It's awfully difficult for the city to receive revenues from beach visitors that are not patronizing our local businesses, that are not contributing to the sales tax base. These metered parking spaces are an opportunity to collect revenues, and that could allow for service enhancement in the long term. Regarding the location of paid versus unpaid parking, based on existing demands for parking, we do expect that parking will be fully subscribed on both sides of the highway, for example, on a sunny weekend day. So we don't see that being an issue tonight. And lastly, I'll just say about the concern about the staff involved with this project. The applicant is the City of Laguna Beach. This project, like any other project, is something that is a team effort. We have city staff across all experience levels, all types of Laguna Beach tenure, working on all projects. This is an important project to the city, and we did put a lot of resources into the project. We're very grateful for the great presentation, the great work that Ms. Suarez and Mr. Tran put into this project this evening, but it was very much a large team effort. And with that, I might look to Mr. Tran if there is any other comments, but otherwise turn it over to the Planning Commission for any questions that you may have of city staff.
Quick question, just to follow up on the 5-hour limit. That only applies to metered spaces, is that correct? Or does it apply to all delineated spaces?
The proposal is for all delineated spaces.
So all delineated spaces would be subjected to a 5-hour limit.
That is
And
correct.
then in terms of enforcement of that, hello. So in terms of enforcement of that, because, people aren't paying or going to a metered station, that would require what, chalking of tires and people coming to somehow determine that a car had been parked there for more than 5 hours?
Yeah, so it's been determined from our Laguna Beach Police Department that we can't chalk tires anymore. That would be physically identifying and digitizing how they are located via most likely a picture, and they would have to vacate the area. So there would be constant enforcement needs and resources that would be going towards those, in addition to the signage that will restrict the 5-hour limit.
Okay. And somebody had mentioned something about CEQA and something about multiple state agencies being involved in a process that somehow that affected this, that triggered, a certain element of CEQA analysis.
So no, I mean, I vaguely recall hearing that comment. We've obviously taken into account all of the public comments. The idea that if multiple agencies are involved, an exemption is prohibited, is not a statement that we agree with.
Okay. Does the city in any way think that this proposed program would increase the city's liability in any way?
And so sitting up here, I cannot predict the future. If I had to pick one way or the other, it would say it would likely reduce liability. If parking spaces are delineated, if the corners are now daylighted, that to me seems like a safer area. Further, the current state down there, as mentioned by numerous public comments, seems to be relatively chaotic. That's kind of the idea for what we are trying to solve for. Whether or not this is the best solution is really up to you all. But to answer your question, no, I do not believe implementation of this project would unequivocally increase the city's liability.
Okay, and speaking of that daylighting state law that has recently passed and that requires, certain parking spaces that we've had downtown for many years to be eliminated because they're within a certain distance of a crosswalk. Is that dependent on whether it's a delineated space versus not a delineated space? So if there's an area that would be subject to that law because it's a delineated parking space, is it somehow exempt from that law because the space is not delineated?
Right. So the law is relatively new. I'm not aware of any case law interpreting it to mean such. So I would take the position that no, whether it's a delineated space or not, that law would still apply.
Okay.
But of course, I did want to add that it's much easier to enforce and it's much easier to demonstrate to a individual coming up to park that if you have a delineated space saying, hey, here's the end of the space, that kind of directs them where to park.
Okay, to my fellow commissioners, has any of the public comments that were expressed here tonight generated any additional questions for you of staff?
Yeah, to follow up on the enforcement question, whether the unmetered spaces are somehow being enforced, I really don't understand how they're being enforced. Because it ties into a bigger discussion I'm sure we'll have, which is whether any of these spaces should be metered.
Understood. And so as my understanding, talking to the police department, that they do have the ability to enforce the 5-hour requirements. Obviously, we've had conversations with the community today in regards to the lack of resources. However, they are committed to this program. And so in regards to how they would go about doing that, my understanding is that they would go ahead and take a look at it. Like I said, they cannot chalk the vehicles, or they're not going to, due to some recent state understanding in regards to some case law. And so they will be looking at it. I know in previous areas that I worked for, the police department or the sheriff's department decided to take pictures of the locations, identifying where they were located, and they would have to vacate that space within the 5 hours that it was identified. And that's the starting point.
It doesn't sound workable to me. That would mean that the limited resources we had, not that the police aren't resolute in trying to enforce. I think they are. They're well-meaning, well-intentioned, but by everyone's description, we don't have the resources. So that would mean then that if I understand what you're saying, is the police are going and taking pictures every hour and then, checking the photos, doing a constant, circuit to check to see. I just don't understand from a practical standpoint how that enforcement functions. So, I mean, that's what when I say leads to a bigger question about whether there should be enforcement, whether there should be meters. It just, I think we have to be realistic in our expectations.
Right. And so as I understand it, our police department may have certain technology, so it's not an individual officer taking his or her iPhone out, taking a picture, time stamping it, and then coming back. Further, I believe some of our parking enforcement officers have that. If not currently, we would look to explore that. It's kind of like an ongoing, camera that would just kind of, as you drive by, would register the car. I would advise the Planning Commission. Obviously, this is a robust discussion. The idea of the feasibility or questioning whether or not our police department will enforce. It's a good question to ask. It's a good question to flesh out. However, that I would point you guys back to the required findings for this, and if you can tie it to that, that's a germane question. But assuming that our police department will not enforce something, and letting that be the reason to dictate a decision, is maybe not the best idea.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm just trying to get to the real issues here, the real fundamentals. But in terms of any additional questions from the public comment, I don't have any.
Commissioner Kellenberg, do you have any additional questions for staff?
No, I do not.
Commissioner Dubin?
I don't either.
Okay, I will close the public hearing and we will go to commissioner discussion and deliberation. Anybody in particular like to start? Commissioner Kellenberg, our voice in the sky.
Thanks a lot.
Well, you don't have to go first. If you
I think
I'm happy to go if you don't want to go.
Yeah, well, Commissioner.
No, I can go. I can go.
Okay.
I think we just had our pilot program. It lasted 2.5 hours, at least in the form that it currently is being proposed. I think that it would be very hard for me to agree with the finding that there's no impact on the adjacent neighborhoods. I would disagree with the staff and their logic on that. I think it's not really complete. And on that basis, I would not be in favor of the proposal as is currently articulated. I think there's two issues, a couple of different issues here. I think one is the articulation of the parking spaces just making things safer. I kind of generally do support that. I think I think we should do a good job, and if parking is going to occur there, I think we have some responsibility of making it as safe as possible. And so I am somewhat supportive of that part of the program. I think mostly along PCH, I think it's of secondary value on the side streets, although it does sound like there is some need for it on the side streets. I think there's a downside to that, and I agree with Brian Mena's comment that it will reduce the number of spaces and that by de facto increase pressure, on the neighborhoods. And I think that's an unfortunate trade-off. I think the metering is a revenue generation issue, which I think is a somewhat different issue. I'm kind of ambivalent on that on PCH. I think I'm pretty definitely opposed to that on the side streets. I think I'm also somewhat opposed to the hourly regulation on the side streets. I think there's a lot of testimony of what that's going to create unnecessary hardship on the adjacent residences. So I guess where I'm coming down on this is that I'm supportive of the articulation of the spaces. I am not supportive of the any kind of metering or regulation of hours on the residential side streets.
Okay, thank you.
And so as proposed, I would not be supportive of the project.
Commissioner Whiten?
Yeah. Will the organized parking spaces with the white tees worsen the parking situation that we have right now? I don't actually think it will. I don't think that is the issue that is going to worsen the parking. I think it addresses the safety issue, which is real, and I think that's an important topic. I do think that the meters on Coast Highway are an incentive to park in the neighborhoods. There's been a lot of comment about that by the neighbors, and that I think is pretty obvious. And I don't think that using metered parking on Coast Highway as a baseline, as a metric to test whether visitors will park in the neighborhoods is going to give us any new information that we don't already have. So that would lead me toward delineating the spaces on Coast Highway and perhaps not metering any of those spaces. Regarding the residential neighborhoods, residential streets, my feeling about it is either the streets are, the spaces are delineated and the meters are removed on the residential streets, or the project is bifurcated and we only approve the Coast Highway portion of the project tonight, and we continue the residential discussion to another time. The residential parking spaces are only something south of 10% of the total, I think probably less than that, total spaces. So they are not really a significant percentage of the total spaces. So that's what I'm thinking right now.
Commissioner Dubin?
So I talked earlier, I'll take my glasses off. I talked earlier about enforcement has always been an issue in South Laguna, and it continues to be that. And with, 4 people in the, parking enforcement group, it's not going to be enough no matter what happens down there. But where I'm at right now is I'm not in favor of any metered parking on the residential streets at all. I'm not opposed to delineating parking on the first block of those streets, just so that, people aren't trying to jam their cars into another car or whatever, but with no time limit. But I am in favor of delineating the Coast Highway. I think the Coast Highway is the problematic and safety part of this program. This is a temporary program too, by the way. And I am in favor of metered parking on Coast Highway only. But I don't like, because I have a problem with page 22, the number 3 finding in terms of the impact on the residential neighborhoods. I can't make that finding. And I read it and I thought about it for a long time, and I just thought, I can't. I have friends who live in South Laguna. I know they're impacted all the time and have been for years. So if the temporary program involves delineating Coast Highway parking spaces, which I think is a good idea, I think that's a safety issue, along with metered parking on Coast Highway only, delineating the residential streets in the first block, but with no meters and no time limit. I could live with that in a temporary program to see how that's going to work. But anything else beyond that, I don't see how it wouldn't impact where you guys live. So I just can't make that finding 3 to say there is not going to be any detrimental effect to the neighborhood. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, well, I appreciate all the comments of all the members of the public. Everybody took the time to come down here. Obviously, people who are most directly affected by this are very passionate about it, and I hear you. But I'm coming down a little bit differently than some of my other colleagues here. Any of us involved in the city government, regardless planning commission or city council, the first and foremost is public safety. It's got to be our top priority. I don't know anybody that can look at the current situation that exists down there and think that that's okay the way it is. It's not. It's not safe. It's really a pretty clear and present danger. And to do nothing, I just don't think is acceptable. And I don't, I'm surprised, by the number of South Laguna residents who I don't know what I'm hearing. Part of what I'm hearing is almost like just leave it alone and let it be. And that's not acceptable to me. It's a dangerous situation. So first and foremost, I think that the spaces on Coast Highway have to be delineated, right? And as far as I'm concerned, they should be metered as well. And then it really comes down to the impact on the residential neighborhoods and the idea of what do we do on some of these side streets. And again, and I was confused a little bit by some of the comments where people who are on 9th Street and 10th Street or 10th Avenue and saying, this is going to be this horrible impact. And I'm like, wait, aren't we just talking about Upland, Catalina, Eagle Rock Way, 2nd Avenue, and 3rd Avenue? Well, those are the 5 streets that were proposed to be metered. The other streets were proposed to have delineated spaces. And I wasn't clear, and that's why I asked the question about, well, are these non-metered delineated spaces still subjected to this 5-hour limit? Well, yes, they are, and I was not clear about that on the onset of this whole thing. So, that affects my opinion about it somewhat. But again, I feel as though, the spaces should be delineated. I mean, the idea that we just have, open areas and let's cram in as many cars that can figure out how to, weasel in between cars with, inches to spare and probably bumping against each other and dinging each other and all that. It's like, why not make marked legal spots? Yes, they're 8 feet wide by 22 feet long. And yes, that probably doesn't add up to as many spots as you can cram in there, if you really try really hard. But is that the right thing to do? To me, no. I understand the pushback because of the 5-hour limitation, the pushback because of, hey, these were spaces that, that we were able to use and never had to pay for. But let's also keep in mind, these are public spaces. These are public streets. These are not, even if it's outside your home and it's on the public street, it's not your spot. It's the public spot. So you have to keep that in mind as well. And I was originally looking at this saying, it's a pilot program. We're talking about a 1-year pilot program in which we could really figure out whether or not this works or goes horribly sideways and doesn't work. It's a 1-year pilot program that has to be reevaluated after 90 days. So after 90 days, and there was comments about, well, why isn't the Parking, Traffic, and Circulation Committee talking about this, and why didn't it go to them? Well, it is going to go to them after 90 days, after there's some sort of data and some sort of feedback for them to evaluate and look at to determine whether or not they would then recommend whether or not to continue it for a 1-year for the rest of the 1-year program to the city council. So here we are, the Planning Commission is hearing about this and weighing in on it. The Parking and Traffic and Circulation Committee is going to hear about it and weigh in on it. The city council is going to hear the PTC's recommendation whether or not to move forward or not. Why not give it a chance and see whether or not it works? That's the way that I looked at it. And I see shaking heads. I see people who don't agree with me, and that's that's your right, and I'm entitled to my opinion as well. But as I hear from what my fellow commissioners, it's obvious that the majority of us, don't feel the way that I do about this. So, I've
About what, though? About the striping, Ken?
Well, about, I don't know, about just well, again, I guess my thing, I guess, we've all kind of said what we, would be supportive of and stuff. So I'm supportive of delineating the spaces along Coast Highway. I'm supportive of,
I think we all are.
okay, I'm supportive of all the spaces on Coast Highway being metered.
Which we all do.
Okay,
Well, no, I
well,
don't.
no, I don't think Commissioner White.
I don't think it will. It's a net revenue. It's a net zero in the revenue department as
For the first
year. And in terms of the pilot program, I think we know that metering is going to exacerbate the problem, but
I'd be in favor of, I'm in favor of delineating the spots on the side streets for the first block for 165 feet. We're not talking about all up into the neighborhoods, blocks and blocks up there. I've been down there. I drive around these neighborhoods. I know what the streets are like. And I'm like, man, you get up into some of those residential areas as you get a little bit higher up, and the streets are very non-uniform, let's say. And to try to put legal 8 by 22 spots along some of those stretches of some of those streets just doesn't work.
you're
right?
going to get any
But
spots.
the first block, for the most part, is not as squirrely as some of those other streets get.
Yeah, I
So
think we all agree with that.
I see, so I personally would be willing to support delineating and putting meters on the first block of that. Now, I don't hear support of that, but I'm willing to support that for 90 days to see whether or not the PTC ends up agreeing with that. But it doesn't sound like there's consensus for that. So,
Why?
I don't enjoy sticking my neck out here and feeling like I'm the bad guy or something. But this is the way I have, after evaluating it, this is the way I'm coming down on it. But I'm willing to to try to come to some sort of consensus here amongst us. I'm not going to try to convince you or any of the other commissioners to side with me. That's fine. So I would say, okay, well then, let's talk about these side streets. So then our options are leave it exactly the way it is. Let's just talk about Coast Highway. Let's do nothing with any of these side streets. Or we delineate the spaces.
Which I'm in favor of.
Right, with no metering.
No
Well,
metering.
we delineate spaces and have metering, which again, that seems like that's off the table. Nobody's, seems to be agreeing with that. Or we delineate the spaces without metering with a 5-hour parking limitation, or, hello, can I finish?
You all got your chance to speak,
Really?
so,
Yeah. Really.
Or we delineate the spaces and with no time limitations and no metering. I'm willing to go with the consensus on all of that. So,
You want me to restate what my position?
I think your position, if I got it right, was that you were just for no meters on the residential, but you were for delineating them.
Yes.
What about the time limit?
I don't think there should be time limit.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay. Commissioner
I agree
Callenberg?
with that.
You agree with that?
Yes, I agree
Okay.
with, I agree with full delineation of everything, meters only or not on PCH, but no other meters or any restrictions on the side streets.
Okay, so to the side streets then, the consensus is delineate spaces, no metering, no time limit. Regarding Coast Highway, are we in consensus for delineating the spaces? Yes.
Yes.
Are we in consensus for paid parking?
Yes.
Metering?
I am.
I am. Commissioner Kellenberg?
Yes, I can be. Yes.
Okay. You're
I'm the odd man out here. I mean, if you can't make the finding that the project won't impact the neighbors, I really believe adding metered parking on Coast Highway is going to exacerbate this parking problem.
Well, we don't know that.
We don't know that, and I don't agree with that, and I don't even know that we know. I understand that the other commissioners saying that the difficulty making that finding regarding not having a negative impact on the neighborhood, but I think that was kind of the point of having a pilot program, was to determine whether or not there was going to be a negative impact on the neighborhood. It sounds like people aren't willing to take that leap of faith, and I understand that. So
Yeah, I mean, I get your point, but what is the baseline for measuring that data? It's really bad right now. The city doesn't have any data to really quantify what that condition is. So how are we going to be able to tell what impact the meters have? I don't know. That's a rhetorical question.
Well, I think there's a balancing act in there, though, also of just public safety in general, certainly on Coast Highway. I mean, we've had people, get killed there, car accidents, without having delineated spaces. It's like it's a free for all for 3
Yeah,
miles.
nobody's debating that.
And as far as the impact to the neighborhoods, if you meter the streets, I mean, people, North Laguna's had the same issue, and I don't know if it's gotten worse or better there. Coast Highway's metered, obviously. My other concern is because they don't have the pay stations available until probably close to the end of the 90-day period.
that was a bit of an issue too. Is
That
like,
that people are going to have to use an app, and as somebody stated, the cell reception in certain parts of South Laguna is not great. So what's going to happen then?
well, and that was a bit of a concern I had as well. It's like, how do we, if all the pay stations aren't in place during the 90-day
Well, that's the
period,
thing.
How do you measure it?
getting accurate data
Right.
regarding how everything's going to work. But
I didn't know that until I met with staff on that today, that they were not going to be able to provide the 22 pay stations in the 3-mile area until who knows when exactly.
Well,
So-
anyway, I just, because I don't want to cut off our, endless discussion here, but I mean, let's, It seems like have we reached consensus? I
No,
think-
let me just suggest another variable.
Mm.
No, since there won't be pay stations, there will be only 2 of the 22 stations needed in the first 90 days. If we dispense with paid parking for the first 90 days, that's a baseline that we can measure. Then at the end of 90 days, when the 22 stations are available, we put them in place, and then we have data we can compare against the first 90 days.
So you're suggesting just delineating parking spaces, period?
In the first 90 days. I mean, this is a variable that's come out of our discussion.
I just think that unnecessarily complicates things.
Okay, well, I'm in the minority, and, I'll go with the consensus.
Okay. Staff, do you believe you've gotten direction from us, sufficient direction?
Yes, thank you. I do believe.
Can I ask one question of staff? Can I ask one question of staff real quick?
Yes.
Are there any pay stations? Are there any proposed metered parking where there is not a clear path, pedestrian path on the inland side of the parking?
Thank you, Chair Kellenberg. That's a great question. And for the most part, the answer is no. There's clear paths to the pay stations. There is one section that is limited in a pathway to the pay station that could be eliminated if that is the desire of the Planning Commission.
I would propose that there be no metered parking or pay parking where there is not a clear path out, away from moving traffic.
Yes. Yeah, but if you don't have.
Who's gonna determine what's a clear path and what's
Commissioners, may I interject?
Sure.
I think we could define that as if there's an accessible sidewalk or a sidewalk to that pay station.
Okay, and
I would accept that.
Does that significantly impact the current mix or a mix of free versus metered parking spaces? And how's that going to affect that?
Slightly. It's only at this moment, it's about 50-50 in regards to metered and unmetered. You're going to lose probably approximately, off the top of my head, approximately like 30 spots or so, 34 spaces in regards to not losing technically, but just unmetered. So now it'll be considered free for 5 hours or
And
free.
does that include the loss of the meters on the residential streets?
No, the residential streets would be approximately 55 stalls total if we don't consider as part of this request or recommendation. So 55 minus the 34.
Okay.
Yep.
Anthony?
Yes, if I may make an attempt at summarizing what I hear is the Planning Commission's consensus. I'll go through the 3 topics: location of paid public parking, the delineation of the parking spaces, and the hour limits. Paid public parking would be limited to Coast Highway only within the areas that have been designated within the proposed plan. But with a twist, it sounds like city staff would revisit the proposed plans and would not meter any spaces that are not connected to a pay station through an accessible sidewalk between that delineated parking space and the pay station. Second, delineated parking spaces would be per plan throughout the project area. So that would be both Coast Highway and within the residential streets per the proposed plans. And then third, hour limits would only apply to the delineated spaces on Coast Highway.
Correct. And the delineated spaces on the side streets would not be subject to any kind of time limitation.
That is correct.
Or
That's my
parking
understanding.
meters.
Correct. They would be unpaid, no hour limits.
Okay, commissioners, everybody on board with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion to that effect?
Move the recommended action by Deputy Planning Manager, Director.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Kellenberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Whiten,
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin,
Yes.
Acting Chair Sadler.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, motion carries. There's a 14-day right of appeal to the city council of anybody who does not agree with that decision. Thank you all for coming and thank you all for your input. Okay, we're not quite over yet with our meeting, so if everybody could kind of exit stage right or left. Commissioner Goldman, Acting Chair Goldman, are you out there somewhere?
No, I
they would
think,
come.
Oh, did he?
I think he was just going to take off. All we have is other business, commission, and then adjournment. Yeah.
Okay, we'll give everybody a minute to leave the room. Boy.
That's funny. Okay.
Nobody's going to be.
Nobody's happy. That's it.
I'm used to it.
Okay, moving on to other business, if there is any other business.
Thank you. I will keep this update quite brief this evening, given the hour. First, a reminder that the Planning Commission has a joint study session with both the City Council and the Design Review Board coming up quite soon here on May 26th. That is scheduled for 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m. I think Planning Manager Samantha Beyer is still waiting for a few RSVPs from this body. So if you have not yet confirmed your availability to her, please do so as soon as you can. And then secondly, I did want to let the Planning Commission know that on Monday, our wonderful city clerk put out a press release for upcoming vacancies on the Planning Commission and other commissions, boards, and committees. We do have 3 chairs on the Planning Commission that are approaching the end of a term, and that means the council will be holding interviews and appointments. You have until May 14th to submit your application, whether you're currently on the Planning Commission or are a resident of the community and are interested in applying. Refer to Samantha's email for more information.
Whose terms are expiring?
So that would be Commissioner Dubin, Chair Kellenberg, and Commissioner Whiten.
Hope you're all reapplying.
You know, I just found out about that today via Stu News and tried to find online where to get an application and just couldn't find it anywhere. So hopefully there'll be a way to achieve that in the next few days.
It is posted to the Board Committee Commission webpage, but what we'll also do is send out a direct link to the Planning Commission. Anyone else who might be listening out there who's having trouble locating that information, feel free to contact me or the city clerk for that application.
When is the deadline for the application?
May 14th.
It's coming up.
May 14th. All
Like a
right.
week.
Anthony, I'm going to be out of town, so I will not be participating in that joint meeting, just to give everybody a heads up. And then secondly, a question. The Neighborhood Congregational Church has reached out to us planning commissioners about meeting regarding their proposal. Do we know when that, I have not responded to the request yet, and do we know when that item is going to come before us?
Notice has not yet been issued, but at this point, the project is gearing up for the next phase. They've essentially cleared the zoning plan check process, and we're preparing that item for hearing now. The projected hearing date is on June 23rd.
Okay, so it will not happen while I'm gone. Okay, and Pat, just a quick, there's no issue regarding applicants like that on a relatively big project asking to have an extended meeting with the planning commissioners or anything like that, right?
Correct. Absolutely not. The one thing I would advise, as I did today during the meeting, if there's any information that you learned during that meeting that's not captured in the staff report or in the oral presentation, that is what we need to disclose. That, of course, gives the public the ability to hear that information, download it, agree with it, disagree with it, try to argue against it. So the act of meeting with an applicant or a project opponent or a project supporter is not regulated by any time. It's really regulated by the information and whether or not you learn something and you base your decision off that.
Okay, and the amount of time that we spent, because I wasn't sure, they were giving us like a window of, and I wasn't sure if like, this isn't like a 3-hour meeting, is it? Or I think maybe they were just giving us a window of time where we could come meet with them. But
Oh, go ahead.
And excuse me, I'll have to correct a misstatement. I was looking at the city council calendar when I informed the commission of the projected hearing date. The planning commission hearing is actually tentatively planned for June 3rd.
On the church?
Correct.
I'm going to be absent from that meeting as well. So in that case, I don't know, I guess it's my own personal decision whether or not to meet with them anyway before the meeting I'm not going to be at, or wait.
Correct. As the staff's kind of go to, whether you meet, the length of the meeting, the substance of the meeting, that's up to the discretion of each planning commissioner.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Is there, well, let's see, what else? Committee, commissioner, and staff reports?
Could I ask, Anthony, would you mind repeating the application deadline for the PC?
May 14th.
Okay, oh, next week. Okay. All right, thank you. And when is the actual hearing with the city council?
June 6th? Wait.
Interviews and appointments will be conducted on June 9th at 3 p.m.
June 9th. Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, that deadline on May 14th is at 5 p.m.
You heard that, Commissioner or Chair Kellenberg?
I think.
May 14th, 5 p.m.
Thank you.
Anyway, yes, he did. Would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Is it the 20th is our next?
So moved.
May 20th.
I move we adjourn to our next regular scheduled commission meeting on May 20th, 2026 at 6 p.m.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.